We're ready?
Okay, we should get the meeting started. We have a really full agenda, and hopefully we can get out before our cars freeze up. So, hopefully you've all had a chance to review everything, and are ready to discuss tonight, keeping in mind to respect everyone's time and keep the meeting moving along. The first thing on our agenda is the district governance and policy in the review of our monthly board agenda. I think Jeff's pulling up.
Nope.
As I was looking at this agenda for tonight, or not for tonight, but the agenda, our board agenda, a lot of things on there are things that we are going to be discussing later on tonight. So, and a lot of them are ongoing with the facilities and policy and a few other items. We've continued to review policy. We've completed, we have an updated form here. It's not on your board book, sorry, I'll tell you that. Completed policy, the 300 policies. We'll be working on the 700 and 800. And then after the midway through the summer, we'll be working on the next series of policies, which should be the 200s, I believe. I'm not sure which I was on kind of in front of you right now, but it's at least the 200s, which involve the board governance, board ethics, board format, meeting format, things like that. So at that time, we'll be able to have some discussion on anything that we see, and we might want to make a change, if it's good, if it's bad, whatever. Let's see. Moving forward, again, the strategic plan update will be tonight, and that's on our agenda as well. And ongoing updates, as I said, on enrollment, construction, budget, and various programs. And then I haven't had a chance to look at this really either, but in purple is highlighted some of the progress that we're making on our different oversight, oversight especially, and I think it's mostly all oversight, right? Yeah. Okay. So you'll have some time to look at that. We'll be having a board development session. That's also on our board agenda. Hoping for February 11th at 5:30. I haven't heard of anyone that cannot come, so we're going to go forward with that at this time. It's important that we do have full attendance. And then the general feeling I got for our retreat in June was that we'd rather do an evening than a Saturday. So we'll be looking for a date for that. And again, to encourage all board members to meet monthly with Dr. Stallo, and or whatever other administrator seems to make sense that month. Maybe that would be a good way to look at it. And I know some of you already have, so that's great. The legislative platform is being presented tonight. And I think that's it, unless you wanted to speak to something specifically, Terry.
No, what we added in the purple for you, just, we kind of look at this, and I know you usually go through this pretty quickly, but really, as you look at it being mid-year, there's a lot that comes to you, and especially with some of the construction, some of the other kind of things that comes to you on an ongoing basis. But what we wanted to add was just you kind of knew our timeline moving forward, especially with the district goals, that purple work that we do. So we just wanted to forecast some of that for you as well.
Then moving forward, if there's no other comments, we'll go into oversight of operations, facilities planning and construction.
All right. Good evening. Welcome. As we kind of kick off, we've got several things under facilities planning and construction. We have a couple things. One is the amendment. We'll talk about that briefly. We'll start by going over the bid pack from the high school and the information that's all in your board packet, because that will set up the conversation that we had at our recent Finance Facilities Long Range Planning Committee meeting. I know several board members did reach out to talk through some of the components that came out of finance facilities, but we will engage in that conversation or facilitate in that conversation tonight. So in a work session, I know this is a time as board members, ask your questions, have discussion, bring questions. If we don't know the answers to the questions, we'll find the answers. The idea here is that we set the stage for you as board members to really understand the issues or understand the topics, and then really give us direction of how we can move forward, bringing you more information to continue to provide oversight to the district and what we can do in order to lead the district according to our strategic plan. So with that, I'm going to invite Russ Schumacher and Jeff Martin from Nexus Solutions to come up here as Jim starts the bid pack overview process that is in your board packet.
I have to make a caveat. We have an updated one. We're gonna have to hand out the sheets. Some things have changed as far as which bids we'd like to accept or have the board approve. So that'll be different than what's in your board pack. So we do have a handout to share with updates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you can send the two chairs right there.
There. Good.
Oh, well, I'll stall while Mr. Dell went to get the updated sheets. So, Russ Schumacher in the blue shirt, have you met all of the board members? I don't think so.
I'm Russ Schumacher from Nexus.
Hi, nice to meet you. Enrique Velasquez.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Michael Nelson.
Hi,
Nice to
Michael.
meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And then Jeff Martin. He
Hello.
is, so Russ, you're a principal owner
Yes.
of Nexus Solutions. Your expertise is really engineering of the systems, efficiency systems, those types
Oversight
of
of the
things.
design process.
Excellent. And then Jeff, you're kind of the lead project
Yes, I'm project manager.
between all of the entities on site. So we see a lot of Jeff. We like seeing a lot of Jeff, which is a good thing because he really is that key person meeting with Jim and Maureen on day-to-day projects as we go forward. So with that, let's jump to the Second Amendment and that overview while we wait for Jim. I think the amendment's fairly straightforward. We've requested an extension of the contingency date with the contract with PLA for the new elementary land from January 31st to April 15th. There's several things that when it comes to setting a site for building that require some time. We had some environmental factors in the fall with a wet fall and also early frost, which see some of the site preparations. But then we also have the platting process and stormwater management design that also requires time in order to flush out, and then also the design of the northbound road. So the contingency date is being recommended to be adjusted in order to afford that time for those projects to come to completion. It does not alter our thank you. It does not alter our closing date, which is May 15th, just alters the contingency date. So, if there are any questions with that? Otherwise, I know in our regular session, we'll be asking the board to seek approval or consider approval of that amendment. So are there any questions? Yes.
I'm assuming our attorneys looked at it and.
Yes, our legal counsel has looked at it. Everything is.
And the aggregates, PLA, everybody's in sync.
Correct. All right.
Any other questions?
No. Again, we talked earlier, and I had mentioned when they moved it to January that I thought that was being too aggressive anyway, so I don't mind the April date, but I would like to know the definition of contingency, just so everyone's on the same board, on the same page.
So the contingency date that's being referenced is the ability for either side to back out of the agreement. And so right now, from the district standpoint, the work of the board of moving forward with the agreement, we're not sensing any change in that. We've got a school to build. From PLA's side, we're not sensing any change that they want to back out either. But also too, in looking at that contingency date, knowing that they couldn't meet that, that's the reason why we would want to move that to the April 15th time. So.
But Jeff, there's certain things that we will validate on April 15th. There was grading, there was a whole bunch of different
Correct.
things that was gonna be hard to do in January anyways.
It is very difficult to do now, yes.
Okay.
Yep. So, all right.
So,
Jim?
okay, thank you. Sorry for that delay. We did have made some changes, so this is different than what was in your board pack or that was discussed earlier today. So we had bid date on January
16.
16th, we had 109, I believe, bids.
108
108.
bids, and then 8 more combined, so a
Yep.
total of 116.
So 116 out of 33 bid
Categories. Yep.
Correct.
So tonight, later on, after we explain this, we bring to the board 8 bid packs that we are looking for approval for bid pack 13. Russ, you want to go through the bidding?
As far as the results?
Yep.
Yeah, we had excellent bid coverage throughout. There were some bid categories that were higher than anticipated. We're not awarding those at this time, so we can look at some cost reduction measures throughout the project. During the design process, we had 2 other entities help estimate the general construction pieces, and about a month and a half before the project went out, we did see that it was over by a few $1 million, and at that point, we took a look at reducing the cost and taking some of the things out that were not in the original scope of work. And that was all done before the project actually went out for bid. We did come in about 7.5% over budget when we did send it out for bid, so we're currently working on identifying some of the reasons for that, and we know a lot of that's due to inflation. We've seen 20% increase in steel prices, validated through not only the equipment suppliers, the contractors, as well as just other design professionals. That's a number that we've got between 17 and 20%. So us actually coming in 7.5%, we were, you want to be on budget, but it could have been worse. So now we have to come up with a strategy to bring it within budget, and maybe a combination of funding, reducing some costs, and taking a look at the scope.
So the 8 that we're bringing forward tonight, we're satisfied with their numbers, and it falls within our budget.
Yes, and it's also some of the more timely contractors that need to be on site first, so we want to get the process going, contracts, shop drawings, and all the other things that have to fall into place before work can start.
Plus, we have the new additions that are already started that we need these guys to help us finish.
Any questions on bid pack 13?
Just one quick
Go
question.
ahead, Mary.
With regards to changes in scope, it's my understanding, based upon my discussions with this, as well as what I'm seeing here, is that no changes in scope that we may make in the future is going to change what we would have been on in bid pack 13 here.
Right, we had reduced it down to the scope for the most part, but there is some refinements as far as materials. You know, things like some of the internal glass, can some of that be reduced? Can some of the tile that's shown, was that more than was originally budgeted? Or did some of the ceilings get a little more complex than we originally budgeted? So things like that. Did more carpet in the existing building get done than we originally budgeted? So we're just combing through all of that information now to come up with where we can look at either additional funding to come to take care of that scope, or else reduce that scope, so it can be take care of at a later time.
So there will be some minor tweaks, but we want to honor the work of the design team.
Any other questions? So, by getting this dollar amount down, you said you have some of the contractors you're not having to do work now, is that what you're saying?
Well, we're delaying the award of, we pulled 3 contractors off of the list that you
Okay.
had previously.
So when you delay them, will they have to come back and rebid?
In
Or
some,
don't want
in
to?
some cases, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, in some, it's just a matter of working with them to refine the things, get a feel for budget overages, and then reducing some of that scope within the contract.
Okay.
And we have 45 days off their bid
To do that kind of stuff. Oh,
to execute the contracts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask
Any other questions, Mary?
clarifying question based on what you said? With the things that we took out of this and that we're going to rebid those correctly? We're not going to just refine the bids that were the lowest bidder? We're actually gonna rebid this, right?
In some cases, yes, where we have a big discrepancy, and some where we're close, we'll just be able to refine it.
Can you give an example for us on one of them that we're gonna rebid?
Yeah, like, we're looking at the general contracting piece. We're taking a look at whether we need to rebid that or not right now. We're evaluating that on Thursday. Some of the other ones though, like for the glass and glazing for the inside, if we choose to reduce some of that, make it smaller, replace some of it with sheetrock, we would want to rebid that, so we were able to get an accurate price for the scope. For the masonry, we just want to refine kind of the numbers and then get a feel for maybe it's some of the schedule, some of the things we can refine just without changing any of the scope. That would reduce some of their number. We may be able to buy steel without directly and save sales tax. Within the roofing, there's some materials we can buy that we can save sales tax. So quantifying those sorts of things. So it doesn't affect the construction, but how some of it's procured and installed, that would reduce the cost.
I asked this earlier, and I didn't, not to you guys, but in the separate meeting that I had. And one of the questions I had is, when we bid these out, particularly the ones that we may be rebidding, are they then subbing out, and can that actually increase the price if we go and rebid them? Because they're dependent on their suppliers and their subs within what they were bidding on?
Yes, some of that can happen. What we did to try to avoid that on this one was separated out to 33 bid categories, because it was such a large project, and there was enough meaty scope of work, the dollar amount, allowed us to make that a separate bid category. But you're absolutely right, in some cases where, like, you would have an insulation contractor underneath mechanical, and all the insulators get full over the next month. Well, that's why we took the mechanical now, because insulation is always a big one, where it can get hidden underneath the contract above it. That number came in under budget, so we're awarding, those sorts of items where that can happen are what we're awarding tonight as well. But splitting it out like we did, the 33 bid packages, helps eliminate a lot of that.
Any other questions?
I guess, because we talked about this a little bit at facilities, just as far as our contingency balance.
Yep.
Once we award these, are we still at a comfortable range for knowing that we still have the elementary to go, or?
Well, we
Do
started out.
you want me to segue into that a little
Yeah.
bit?
Sure.
All right. So, this is great.
Okay.
So I'm gonna pass this around. This is what we had shared at Finance Facilities Long Range Planning Committee meeting. We're looking for a way in order to tabulate and track bids and bid awards and budgeted amounts and the use of contingency in the projects that we have. And so we started with, if you recall, we started with an original start of, bid tabulations, budget, and then a certain percentage of contingency allocated. And then there was another shift through the FLIRT committee of adjusting it. Now we're trying to get a little tighter with how we are looking at, and just in a way to be real clear about the projects, what's been awarded through bid, as well as how are we using the contingency. So what we have before you this evening came through the FLIRT committee, bring it to the board, work session to really talk through how we're tracking the projects, as well as how we continue to allocate contingency. Contingency is designed to be used for the construction projects. It's not an emergency fund, it's not above and beyond, but we anticipate that as we go from budget to the design to the actual bid process, to be able to use those contingency dollars to round out those projects. So with what Russ was just saying, what we also talked about, and I'm gonna pass around this, with the high school project coming in a little higher, that 7.5% to 8%, a little higher than what we anticipated. We did go through the project twice before it went out to bid to value engineer some components out, yet we're still seeing this, the 7.5% to 8% above what we had budgeted. And so we currently have adequate contingency to cover all of the additional costs from this overage. However, as you can see, if you look at the bottom number, you see that the amount of contingency we have for the remaining projects for the new elementary and for Greenwood is approximately 1.65%, which is somewhat lean when we're talking about some of those projects that are coming forward. While I think we can all say we're sort of on the tail end of going out to bid, we have a lot of construction ahead of us, and so contingency is designed to help us get through that process. So at the committee, we talked about, we can certainly look at using the contingency in order to offset that. But I think we came to the realization we also have to understand too that there are some market factors that are impacting our project overall. One is, as you heard, tariffs. I think the cost of the work that's being bid too, as far as labor. Jim, you had talked about that. And then we're seeing an inflationary rate of about 9%. and our planning assumption was 4.5%. And so there's some factors that 3 years ago when we went as a board, we forecasted this work and tried to understand what are we trying to allocate, what are the projects. You know, we just have to recognize as we work through this, there's some things that we have to plan for. And this is the work that we started talking about. Is there a possibility of using perhaps fund balance to offset the contingency, particularly when we look at the remaining projects, New Elementary, Greenwood, and also current construction. How do we look at that over the next several months, next several board meetings to really understand, is that something the board wishes to engage in, to have a conversation about? We'd like to facilitate that conversation with the board, really to get your sense of, you know, how would you like us to proceed? And that was really the general sense coming out of the FLIRT committee group as well. So Stacy, I know you were there, Jonathan was there as well as a member. Is there anything that I'm missing in terms of that conversation?
I think the only thing to emphasize too is it's, you know, the work that's been done up until this point, because my concern was, you know, we have so much left on just these couple of project, you know, spots, high school and elementary, is that if we are short by a certain amount of money that, you know, it's not gonna adversely affect just 2 sites. And I think, you know, that this whole process the whole way through, because of, you know, the inflation that we've seen has been going on. I mean, you know, we've been streamlining and doing the best we can the whole way through. And Nexus really leading the charge on that. So it's not like this is something shocking, in my opinion. Because, I mean, as we watch these sheets come through, you can see the contingency dollars, you can watch the headlines in the news and realize there obviously is some pretty significant inflation with steel tariffs and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think it's surprising, I mean, in my opinion. But that was kind of what our conversation was, is that, you know, this has been ongoing and it needs to be ongoing, and, you know, to keep the spirit of the referendum and what we were asked to deliver, so.
I think, you know, therein lies, I think, what we wanted to talk about this evening. Julie did share with us, third time's the charm, Jim, for passing around. Getting your steps in, yeah. Did, you know, in order to set up the conversation too around fund balance, you know, the board policy on fund balance, board policy is between 8 to 12%, unrestricted or undesignated fund balance. Currently, that fund balance is at 14.81%. Looking at that as a possible option for consideration to assist with construction and some of the projects, we wanted to at least share that as well to set the stage for future board meetings to have that conversation. So that kind of gets to your question, Stacy, about what does contingency look like with the 7.5 to 8%. So if we were to look at the budget right now and use contingency, we'd be approximately 1.6% remaining of the total contingency for those projects. So,
And obviously we're more comfortable with a little bit higher percentage than that, I'm assuming.
Correct.
I think a number being thrown around was 1.5 million additional capital, is that correct?
Okay, so I just want to ask a couple questions. The contingent, and this is just confirming what I think I heard earlier and what we've heard last year. The contingency fund that we had a $3 million contingency line item in the initial dollars for the referendum, and then the rest we're getting right now, based on our estimates, not including anything for the fund balance, are coming from the interest earned from the delayed, from the interest we've made because of the delayed elementary.
Yes, those are the 2 components. I'm not quite sure if that number 3 million is correct or how it all split, how it all shook down, but those are the 2 components.
Yeah. There's a line item for that. Is that correct?
Contingency was a percentage of the budget.
4.5%.
Right.
There was a line item in there, I could have swore it said 3 million, but I could pull it up.
And
It was
that
on
could be what was, you know, but it's calculated as a percentage of.
It added up to 6.5
projects.
Yes.
Okay.
If you go to this handout, first one we handed out, and items line 223 and 224.
So, you know, when I'm comparing this to the original, first budget tracking with all the referendum information, the bids and everything like that in there, we did not have a contingency line item on the May 9th, 2018 first budget spreadsheet that was delivered to the board. It didn't appear again until in the consent agenda in September. And now I'm seeing different, so I'm trying to compare where the numbers went and all that. We, you know, when I go back to the original referendum document that we all signed and voted on, there was a line item in there that added up to the total 109 or something like that, that included that contingency fund. So I remember asking in the board meetings if that's where it came from. And I'm just trying to clarify where the funds are coming from and making sure those funds are there.
Yep.
So
So-
we're not dependent on interest from something else or, you know.
So there, this document, this is the third rendition. So the documents that you stated, this is different, and each time has been really, you know, coming through the Finance Facilities Committee of how can we really kind of track what it is we're doing with the bond as well as projects and contingency. And I think it has changed, and so I think trying to draw some comparisons might be a little difficult. The other part too that this also takes into account is looking at long-term facilities maintenance funding
Those monies are.
and capital funding as well for these projects. And so,
grants.
and those, when we look at, and I think the approach that we've taken is as we've gone through the referendum, delivering on what the community approved, when we're looking at building additions onto buildings or tying other buildings in, it does impact our long-term facilities maintenance work. And I know, Jim, you've spoken to this too, is that has resulted in some of the projects being moved up, shifted around and over that 10-year plan. So we're able to capitalize on some of the, whether it be bids or quotes, getting better prices, so we don't have to go back and do that later. But this document does take into account all of those, which is why you see a number, 125 million for the budgeted amount relative to the 109 million, because it does include those other two big other funds for these projects. So that might be another reason why it isn't a direct correlation to that.
Actually, the May 9th one did include LTFM,
Okay.
and it was 119 million as of May 9th. I'm just trying to make sure that I understand the changes.
Sure.
You know, and the second part of my question is how much control do we have over scope going forward? Are there things that we could delay, do later, go back and look at the design and take some things out that are too expensive? What are our variable costs here that we have choices over?
Well, I think, you know, as far as nothing's built yet, so there's always the opportunity, you know, to refine things. But what we're finding and what we would find is the longer we wait, the more expensive it does get, unless you eliminate items out of there. But there's always the option to take some of the items out, obviously, to reduce cost. But everything we did include at the end was the intent of the referendum and the direction collaboratively that was obtained by the design committees and then the administrative leadership team that had input into the design.
Well, there's certain things, I mean, there's gonna be hard infrastructure. If
Mhm.
we're going to, let's say, build an extra pod, you either build or you don't.
Mhm.
That's not a variable cost
Right.
anymore, right?
Right.
But things that we put internal, things that maybe we can delay and add later,
Mhm.
you know, just things like that, that I'm just wondering what are our choices? And what are the pros and cons of each of those choices? There's some things like if we take out, like I think we talked about the stairwell, you know, if we take that out, we can't put it back in later.
Correct.
Right.
So that's a hard choice that we need to make if indeed that's one of the choices we want to make. But I'm looking at those types of examples that may be on the table still from a design perspective.
Well, and it is pretty iterative, you know, even at the elementary now, as we're in the middle of design and issuing it here in a couple months, and we have done that process that you're referring to throughout the design with the ALDT, is we would come back with lists of things that we saw that would be beyond scope, and we would, you know, quantify it with a cost and decide which direction we wanted to go, to include it, to not include it, to bid it as an alternate. After the bid, we do the same process. We'll come back with a list, sit down with the administrative leadership team, get input and direction on that, come back, redesign and rebid, or just refine depending on what the item is. So that process you're talking about is going on as we speak.
And in that process, they know that we're over now,
Yes.
and that's a consideration, I
Yes,
assume.
so we know
Just
that
wanna
we're
make
over.
sure.
Yes, we know that we're over, and we get input not only from the design professionals, the contractors, as well as the project managers, and between all three, come up with recommendations that make sense and still meet the intent of what we have to achieve with, the project we're building.
Michael, did you have any questions?
You just read my mind, don't you? So it seems to me, in layman's terms, very layman's terms, we have a little bit of a balancing act going on. One is we did the best we could when we talked about the referendum and setting aside an inflationary fund. And we made a decision then, and we're with that number in terms of our contingency. We're looking at these bid packs. I will just say that I was at the Minnesota State School Board Association conference and got to visit with some other school leaders and teams, and their bids are coming in sometimes around 40% over. So I'm feeling pretty good about what we've been getting in from the numbers that I got from all of you. It sounds to me like we are okay at this point in terms of the project we promised the community for the referendum. If down the road we get too slim on that fund, we have options through our fund balance, which is above where we have board policy set anyway. So we aren't necessarily at the point where we have to pull things, big things out in order to deliver what we asked for. Did that make sense? Am I kind of getting that this is sort of, we're doing a little bit of this and we're not necessarily saying we have to pull a stairwell or anything else? I want to underscore what Stacy said, is that the team came together for the community and said, here's what we're doing. And we're still looking at doing that, and we're in pretty good shape overall.
That was really the direction from finance, facilities, long-range
Okay.
planning as well, is contingency, general fund, or would you like us to cut the project back?
Mhm.
And general consensus of the committee was, let's talk about the contingency and set the stage for looking at those other projects as we move forward with the remaining contingency and getting a better understanding around utilizing fund balance. So with that,
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay.
I think, with just looking at the percentage here of, because we had Julie run this, I think we're at 14.8% of our budget right now, and even, I think her recommendation was 500 a year, but even if we took the whole 1.5 million this year and budgeted for it, it would bring it down to 14.1%. So not, still above our fund balance policy. I think, we budget pretty conservatively, every year, and we continue to seem like just creep up on our fund balance. So, I think, my feeling is I'd like, this is why we save our money,
Yes.
in my opinion. Because I don't wanna cut square footage or end up, having to go back sooner because we didn't do it right, or enough. I think, the scope was cut down already once with the first referendum, going down to 109 from 129. So in my mind, we've done a lot of cutting and scraping and looking for every penny already.
Yeah.
So this is a perfect use of additional unassigned operating dollars in my mind.
I personally
Enrique?
would-
I agree with that, absolutely.
Do you have anything else? So, questions or?
No, I met with Jeff earlier and we ran through some of the numbers and he addressed a lot of my questions. And some of the looming ones that I had were really addressing more of what's the required fund balance, what does that 8 to 12 really look like? And it's really untouchable. So I feel confident that we're well outside of that, and if we have unreserved funds that we could allocate, then that weren't intended or weren't approved for other purposes, then I would feel confident moving forward with that. The plan that was proposed, option B, I think is the handout that Jim Bell provided, looked like appropriate.
Might be A, thinking the other way around.
Oh,
Option
okay.
A.
I think it was
Very good.
B before.
You're both
Yes,
right.
A.
Okay, Mary, did you have any comments?
Well, I have been following Minnehaha Academy, Wayzata, and Hennepin, and I did talk to them at length at various times during the year. And they are in a little bit better shape than we are as far as their estimates coming in. And they do bid a little bit differently, and they did do things a little bit differently than we did, but so far they were able to manage it fairly well. And so I did request that maybe we talk to them and see how they're handling things. Obviously still came in a lot higher than everyone thought, given the changes since their referendum that was passed the same time ours were, but they were also a little bit more ahead of the game because they didn't have the elementary school issue and a few others. But they still, they're a $300+ million referendum. They're huge on Anoka, and of course Minnehaha. They had the ultimate surprise. They did not have any planning in advance for what happened there.
Exactly.
So they also came in at or under budget for most of their things, and they're still finalizing their building. So I'm wondering if there's some things we can't learn from that. The other thing that I am concerned about, and I'd like to see some financial analysis with regards to this, because you know, I do go to the AIA meetings every now and then in my other jobs, and do pay pretty close attention, and I am a little worried. Don't think the fund balance is that big of a deal, but I would like to see an analysis done if our tax revenue starts to go down because the market starts to experience some downturns, if it's possible, to understand the net impact and making sure that we are still safe from a fund balance perspective and from a cash flow perspective. There's a lot of estimates going on right now that are not looking favorable after June at all, from housing to obviously a whole bunch of different things. So
From a construction cost
well,
aspect?
actually,
Or?
see, I you know, and I didn't look at this after we talked earlier, but the Mortenson index does show a drop off in costs, their 18-month forecast.
Mm.
How that affects us and what we have to bid ahead of time, it may have absolutely no impact. Would be nice to see if we could kind of try to wiggle that a little bit to make sure that if prices do start to drop, that we're able to take
I think we're starting to get a
advantage of that.
little off of our topic of what we're trying to discuss right now, and I'm not sure if the board wants to pursue comparisons with Wayzata and Minnehaha, and I'm not sure which other one you said.
Anoka Hennepin.
Anoka Hennepin. If that's the direction of the board, that we do something like that, I guess I'd like to hear that.
It's just a learning exercise, just to go. I mean, I'm not telling you guys to do any extra work. I followed it, and I'm just wondering if there's anything that we could learn from it.
Okay, I'm getting a shake and a couple no's that they're not interested. I guess I'm ready to use fund balance if we need to use fund balance, because that's what we have it for. And I'm also a strong believer in using the money on the people that have helped us get to where we're at, and they're the ones that are here now. So if we can do a nice balance of the two, that'd be great. I also agree with Stacy on that. I don't want our last project to be shorted because of what we spent earlier. So I mean, I guess that's your challenge, to make sure that what we promised the community is what happens. At this point, I'm not really looking personally toward cutting anything. Let's see if we can make it work. And when I say that, I don't want to use lower quality products either, just to get by. I don't think that's what you're saying, but I wouldn't want to have to replace something 5 years from now because we didn't use the right product.
We still want to provide a 30-year solution, obviously. Excuse my voice, I'm got a cold going right now, it's very scratchy. But, so what we'll do is we'll continue to refine that then, and we're also interviewing all 33 of the bidders. Some have discovered math discrepancies in their bids, right, and want to pull their bids. So we're going through all of that process right now, and we'll provide updates, every couple of weeks with your team, so that we know exactly where things sit.
Any other comments?
Just maybe one, just with years past, and I think we have been on the board long enough to see this go on and on. We haven't used it much lately, but you know, in the A section, I'm looking at this estimated fund balance. The A section is the assigned, and that's the actual area where we actually have say in what happens with the funds. The B section is restricted by many laws. I would just maybe make a recommendation that we have an assigned in construction and put 1.5 in it, and that way we can track, you know, in another way. I mean, that's just a recommendation, you don't have to take it, but we've done it in other situations where we've been able to use it, and that money gets set aside, and then it's there. Just looking at this, I mean, cash flow, honestly, I think it's been on there since I've been on the board. Hasn't changed much, so. There's money in there. Cause that's from when the shift, when they used to, like, pull empty the shift, and the schools were having to borrow. Yeah, that's what that's from, I mean, that's a ways. So, that was quite a while ago. So, I don't know, maybe that's something we can talk about in the future, but there is, you know, I think areas there, and if it's a way that people wanna see it tracked. I would think with what we have going on, if 1.5 is taking us from 14.8 to 14.1% in 1 year, I'd like to see us take it off, you know what I mean, like, just move it, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna use it all, but it's there and it's accounted for.
Rather than over the 3 years,
Yeah,
just do it
I
all at
mean,
once, is that your suggestion?
We don't know what we're gonna get funding wise for, you know, so I'd rather if we have money, put it in something and get it assigned so that we have confidence in the project going forward.
Any other comments?
Yeah, just one question. I know we've moved things back and forth, and this was mentioned between LTFM. Is the 1.5 gonna be strictly for the fund, or is there still an opportunity to move things between LTFM? Or is that already?
No, we have opportunity.
Okay. And does that give us also more opportunity from our funding and from our, the way we get reimbursed?
It can offer relief for bond projects,
Okay.
depending on what that piece of the project is.
Okay.
And we've utilized that a lot, or not a lot, but we have used some of that already.
Okay.
And again, the advantage for LTFM is we get 25% rebate from the state.
Right.
It fits into the project and it allows us to do some of our maintenance work in conjunction with construction projects.
Okay, Jeff, do you have the direction that you need?
So at the next board meeting, in February, would you like this as a update again with the board? I know Julie will be back and she can give a more thorough review of the financials as far as looking at fund balance relative to contingency with a recommendation that the board can discuss. Because there will be some high school projects at that first board meeting in February where we will be seeking board approval beyond bid pack 13.
And all that'll take into consideration what you're working on now.
Correct.
Get that.
Yes.
Are we in agreement on that coming back that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, do you have anything else?
I will work with
Facilities?
Julie to thank you very much. I think that's the entire packet that we have this evening for facilities construction.
Okay, we'll move on then to transportation updates.
Okay, so I
Thank
passed
you.
out in your board package a copy of the state statute that requires us to provide transportation for charter school within our district boundary. Aspen has asked for transportation beginning next school year. We have started some work with that. We have 3 buses we can use from our current fleet to accommodate that. However, we're gonna ask for 2 more buses for next year's growth and to make that work for Aspen.
You're gonna ask, wait, say that again? What?
We're gonna, for next year, we'll be asking for 2 buses to make sure that Aspen can get service. We can use 3 buses we currently have.
Okay.
It's based on routing and capacity, but we can't make it work with the busing we have.
Oh.
And over the last few years, we've added 2 buses, I think, every year over the last 4 years. We've done some preliminary work. Their school day would be from about 9:05 to 4:05. Based on the work we did so far, just preliminary. I guess the reason for my report to the board is to let you know that we will be asking for 2 buses this upcoming for next year, in part due to the charter school request, and not specific to just our growth.
Questions, Stacy?
Do we have an idea of how many students it is that we?
300 and, yeah, 375, 380, something like that. Again, it's 40 square miles, we have to cover our whole district.
And then what do we use as a rate? Is it, are we 2 miles? I can't remember what are we? Like our
We're 1
walking?
mile and 1.5.
Because that was, when I was reading through this, it said it was a 2 mile
Up to 2
radius.
miles, which is the same for every school district.
Right,
Just,
but we're 1 and 1.5.
Correct.
So are we honoring that as well for them, or?
We kind of assumed that.
Okay, I just a question.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just another question.
Oh, you have one more?
Sorry, just one more. I had it written down, I can't read my own writing. So, just a question, if we close and they wanna, are they subject to our schedule? Like, I mean, like today, if we close, are they subject to,
Yep.
they have to close too?
Yep, St. Mike's, similar situation, when we close, they close. Special ed, when we close, we don't provide service in special ed areas with the co-op.
Okay, and as far as like the boundary and all that, will they have a say in that as well? Like,
We're gonna have them, they're invited to be part of, that community
okay.
input
Yeah.
team.
Okay.
Really, their piece of that conversation is, input around start time.
right, okay.
Though we'll drive those decisions.
Yeah, right.
Based on our efficiency.
And they're aware of our situation, and obviously, that we're gonna have to, that we may give them a schedule this upcoming year,
Correct.
that may totally change for the
Yep,
next year?
correct.
Okay.
I can say they're kind of excited. Some of those kids are on the bus right now for an hour and a half.
Oh.
That's not fun.
That's not our busing system.
No, of course not. We can do a little better than that.
But the 375 is the students that are our students within
Correct.
our boundaries.
Within our boundaries.
They have more students than that.
Yeah.
Would they be walking? I mean, like if they're on the line and stuff, I mean, could they be walking to one of our bus stops?
Or driving, or like.
Like how we do with our other
Yeah,
open
as long as we
employees?
have capacity and it's not getting in the way of what we're providing, if there's room, we certainly would allow that.
And as far as the dollars allotted per student, is that anywhere near to what the cost of 2 buses would be? Or
No.
whatever the cost of this is?
No, I think it's 4% or just under 4% per student.
4% of the funding?
the general,
Yes,
people.
that
per
cost
pupil.
does not equate out to what it
No.
costs.
No, we're never gonna make money on transportation.
Okay. Right. That's my concern.
Yeah, so these 3 buses, are they dedicated to the charter schools and private school, or is that something we use too? How does the percentage use?
So right now, we have, based on the time that we came up with 9 o'clock, we have 2 buses from the high school that will be able to peel off and start picking up kids, and 1 from $5. Once they do their drop, they can go out and start picking up kids, but we need 5 buses to do that.
Okay, and we're adding 3, is what you're doing, 2, okay. All right, so what is the percentage that, because I saw some numbers in there, and I've seen the forms come by, if you drive your kid, et cetera, you get a tax break and blah, 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 but what is the percentage that we actually get subsidized by putting this in place for our own kids?
It's just under 4%.
Just under 4%.
Based on per pupil unit that we get from the state.
$288.
this year.
And that was the total of the 6 that we would say would go, 6,000 that we'd say would carry on?
That's the general, yeah,
That's
based
the
on,
general.
yeah,
Yeah.
basic, yeah.
Okay.
Because we just get the basic general.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand how it works and what it
Yeah.
helps us, because buses are expensive.
Yeah.
And we're gonna need them anyways with our
Yeah, we are, and,
community, so. okay.
right, that's the point I wanna really make sure I leave is, you here today, is that it's not gonna be just for Aspen. We have traditionally added 2 buses with our growth, and so it's good news, actually.
Okay. Michael or Nikki, you have a question? So just to clarify, on the buses, it won't be just running the buses around for Aspen, kids that go to Aspen, it'll be for whoever's
Everything we
picked
need,
up at
yeah.
that time that it works out for, correct?
Yep, every time we add a bus, no matter what, it's for all tiers.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, you got what you needed?
Yep.
I did, thank you.
Strategic direction and, well, strategic direction.
Excellent. I'll go ahead and get started. We had talked in November, as you know, November 1st, we had a community strategic planning process. We talked at the November study session, and there were some additional questions that came about that we wanted to provide space to talk about it. So I'm going to run through a quick review of where we were, and then we're going to talk especially around some eSTEM work. So we'll review the process, we'll review input from board members and stakeholders, promote shared understanding of environmental education in eSTEM and that evolution, discussed eSTEM, aligned our district goals, seek a little bit more information from y'all as you talked about the A and brought up the A last time, and then our goal tonight is to get some direction on those strategic directions. Again, you all were either at the strategic planning process with our community or were aware of this, but this just provided a little bit of a review of the background on why we came back together this year. This is our strategic plan, actually, just because I want to be sure that you have reference in our current wording. I also have a hard copy for you of that. This was just how we advertised, that we got people to come, again, review. I don't know if I'm working, Jeff, or if you are. Had 128 people there, but you're making me look good with the clickers, so thanks.
Reading your mind.
All right, I think I need you. So this was the draft strategic directions that we brought to you on November 19th. And with that, we had some conversation. We actually talked a little bit about on the 19th, I'm going to actually move us from this slide, thanks to the next one, because this is what happened after our conversation, through our conversation with input from you. Actually, that night we brought forward to you, adding something about opportunity gaps, language as we continue to talk about reducing the achievement gap. The language about reducing the achievement gap sounds like it's more about the students need to do something. And if it's reducing or something about the opportunity gap, it's more responsibility on the district. So we brought about that conversation. We actually, in our recommendations, have a little bit of change in wording because the way we read that, it's like, wait a minute, we don't want to reduce achievement and opportunity. So we've got a recommendation later on with recommendations for that. The other conversation, I'm going to move down actually to number 5, and then I'll come back to 4. Number 5, you all gave us some great input in terms of wordsmithing that strategic direction and really ensuring that social emotional part of what we want or what our community said they wanted us to add to the strategic directions are there. And then number 4, we talked about integrating and expanding the input. So the original language that we currently have is expand and embed environmental focus across the district. Where the stakeholders landed on that is to have that encompass eSTEM, which is really in the last 5-6 years what we've been marketing, what we've been working on. So that was the recommendation that came from the community, and then there was some conversation here about that A. And we kind of landed it with that and said, hey, let's bring it back and have some conversation. So really, the rest of this conversation, we want to learn a little bit more about what you meant with the A after we share some information about that evolution.
Yeah, we just wanted to start with a little bit talking about environmental education, which goes back to some that would say 15 to 20 years ago, starting in Five Hawks, and just kind of a shift to look at the environment. It's sort of been the culture of the community, being invested in really kind of, I guess, no pun intended, but starting its roots in the schools to get kids interested in being environmental stewards and understanding the environment. And so for many years, environmental education started at one site and then it started to go to other sites and became this district-wide focus of getting kids engaged in the outdoors, having real clear environmental education outcomes and experiences for kids. It started also with a partnership with the Jeffers Foundation as well. And at one point, we had a part-time naturalist as well as environmental education coordinator, just working with staff on embedding those activities with kids. And as we've evolved as a district, things change. We started looking at the next step or next process of environmental education and wrapping in components of STEM. How do we really find, and we know that from an environmental education standpoint, the focus of interdisciplinary and real world problems, but we also wanted to bring STEM into that focus as well. And so again, we started with how do we move from a definition of environmental education to eSTEM. And so this is our district definition of eSTEM, is that focus on interdisciplinary approach to instruction, learning, focus on inquiry, real world problem solving in the 21st century, applying hands-on science, tech, engineering, mathematical practices with projects, field experiences related to the environment, and available to all K-12 students. And so for the last, I would say probably 6 to 8 years, we've been focusing on eSTEM and branching out and incorporating how do we continue to blend these so that kids have these hands-on applications, real world, really using environmental education as a foundation, but expanding and bringing components of engineering, technology into the classroom and into the student experience as well. And so what that's looked like is from EE, a few years ago we started looking at the Laker learning traits. What do we expect kids to be able, how do we expect them to be working with technology, with each other, around communication, looking at project-based learning. How do we, you know, as you can see some of these pictures here too, they're worth 1,000 words, but how do you get kids up and moving and engaged in these types of activities? Authentic, experiential, you have student voice and choice. They have the ability to choose some of the activities or some of the concepts that they're studying, as well as how they're applying that. More recently, our focus has been on the learning experience, focusing on student engagement. How do we engage all students in the learning that's happening in the classroom, outside of the classroom? How do we engage them to be consumers of knowledge? How do we continue to pique their curiosity but build strong connections with kids? And we know, number one, that starts with the teacher working with students, one-to-one, small group, whole group, to help, you know, build their passion for learning. And now we're shifting to a real, how do we really embed or work towards personalized learning? Taking every kid where they're at and continuing to, number one, have that plan for them as they continue to build on their areas of need, as well as expand on their areas of strength. You know, how do we continue so that, you know, they get there, again, build all of these 3 components in there, but moving forward on a more personalized approach. And so that's been sort of our journey in a nutshell and our focus from our environmental education to eSTEM. I would say through the process, environmental education has always been a strong hallmark. You know, if you look across the district, students engaged has always held. Out with the outside, with the outdoors, consumers, recycling. You know, we just have a lot of experiences, a lot of examples that we can really go to share. STEM is still a work in progress. You know, we need to build more authentic, and we're getting better at that. You know, we've made some curriculum decisions, some resources, additional professional development. But again, relative to environmental education, where we as a district have been working on it for 20 years, we're going to need more than just 6 to 8 years to build on that full STEM experience, but it's happening very rapidly. And as a board, or previous boards have heard about coding and some of those other components that we're putting in place for the student experience as well.
I think that's one of the things is and I'll let Jeff talk about this after, but I'm sorry for interrupting,
No,
but I
go
think
for it.
one of the things, and I've come to learn too, because, you know, the building was environmental education, or the district was long before I came here, and even the STEM, the eSTEM banners on the schools, you know, that was a lot of my questions those first couple of years. What's this really mean? Where are staff? What's the buy-in of that? And the flagship of the environmental education, the outdoor learning experiences, has been amazing. And I think the eSTEM part is kind of this way of being that we are, you know, as we're incorporating a more personalized project-based learning approach. So while it has certainly the components of science, technology, engineering, and math, it really is what's the pedagogy and what do we want the experience of kids to be as well. There's a couple more pictures, Jeff.
Yep, a couple more pictures. This has been our more recent, couple of years now at the high school, the process of making syrup. So you've got science teachers you know, you see Sue Moen, our district naturalist there. Certainly some attributes relative to math, related to that process and the chemistry behind making maple syrup. And so with that, it's really kind of bridging the gap that one of the last board meetings looking at the feedback from the strategic planning was really clarity around the A. You know, should it be E-STEAM? And having just further conversation around that.
And that's
moving
kind of where we
forward.
left it off with you. So for us, we just wanted to hear a little bit more. I know that was kind of at the end of our conversation, and we said we would bring it back for more conversation. So wanted to hear a little bit more, desires around, or just clarification around what the A means. Is it arts activities, athletic, academics? Is it around programming, or what are some of those things?
Is that something you want to do now before you finish your presentation?
Yeah, that's where we are with the presentation.
All right.
You could have a comment?
Sure, Mom.
So as probably the most labeled arts advocate at the table, when I sat in the back and heard the board talk about it, I went, yeah, let's go E-STEAM, that's great. But I didn't really understand what E-STEAM was. I thought that A meant we'll add more arts programs, we'll support our arts programs better, we'll toot our own horn a little bit more. So I really had to dig in and gather some research. And my understanding is that both in STEM and STEAM, there are these pillars, the science, technology, whatever, and art can be a pillar. The magic in putting them together is the integration, like the maple syrup example that you just showed. If you go STEAM, you're still doing that integration. You're just trying a little harder to put that arts piece in. I totally misunderstood. I don't think we're ready to slap personally an A on our banners yet. However, in the research that I did about this integration, I'd love to know down the road that we could kind of look at what our teachers are already, learn more about these collaborations. Maybe there's some of this art stuff going on in the English classroom and in the science classroom. Integration really is the key. I agree with you both that we really need to stop and say, is our STEM really doing what STEM should do, or is it just banners, right? Let's learn from our teachers. It's about experience. And one of the advantages I have seen in doing some reading is that when you do make sure that the arts sometimes are part of those mixes in the classroom, STEM sometimes still does not tighten up the achievement gap, which surprised me. Sometimes women, minorities, the girls still hold back a little bit, and sometimes the arts appeals to a group that might otherwise, even in the integration of the other four, slip back to the back of the room a little bit. So personally, what I'd just like to share with the board is I think we have great arts programming in the district. Also, I've worked with arts faculty in my years of volunteering and feel that they always say the administration is supportive of the arts. Are there other offerings we want to do? Maybe, but I don't know if that's the same as a STEAM discussion. So I would say I would be interested in learning more about it down the road, but I don't feel prepared enough to say now we need to add an A until we better understand where we are and what that looks like. And I just lost what that last thought was. I just think it's very exciting, but it may already be happening in our classrooms and we don't even know it. Or maybe it's just something we're gonna look at doing down the road. But I am confessing that when I sat in the back and cheered last time, I didn't really get what adding the A meant. And it started out of an idea at Rhode Island School of Design and integrating the arts and design into real world thinking and projects with those other four pillars, so that when we're trying to meet our mission of creating learners who can perform in an ever-changing global community, that's just one more strength we give them. They might be going out to jobs that don't exist yet, and the arts being a part of those study sessions can sometimes help with some of those skills, even if they're going to be a famous scientist or whatever. So that's my 2 cents. I'm confessing what I didn't understand, and I feel like there's a lot more to learn yet. Stacy?
I was one that threw it out there, so I guess I'm the one responsible for it.
No, and I cheered.
I know. But when, Dr. Stallo came at me the next day and said, well, do you mean arts activities? I was like, I don't know. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's good. I think it's something, because just, that was brought out of basically not just, I wouldn't even say what came out of that strategic plan night, but a critique that people have had in the community that, hey, why isn't arts up there? And so, that's why I threw it out there. And I think, it's maybe a point in topic, and Michael, I agree, we probably don't need to put it up on the sign, but I think it's something that, we should continue to look at our programming and see if there are ways into which we can improve. I'm not taking away from anything else, but if those opportunities exist, I mean, honestly, for everything, for all activities. So, yeah,
And may I just clarify,
Go ahead.
a clarifying point? I'm glad you brought it up. I think we need to be having the dialogue. I think we have a lot to learn.
I'm not saying that it has to be this, but I think in the future, it'd be a good thing to have for that.
Enrique?
I'm kind of like Michael, a huge proponent of the arts, although not visual. I'm
Yeah.
more musical performance. So I like the idea. Again, I don't know that we're quite there yet, but having the dialogue and making sure that we can provide opportunities at all levels so that any student that comes in, whether they come in kindergarten, 9th grade, middle school, wherever, they can dovetail in and see, okay, this is an esteem facility. There are esteem programs at wherever I am within my learning. I don't have to wait until high school, or I didn't miss it already in elementary school. I want to be able to see and experience and kind of transcend my learning, or augment it rather, with the arts. And the arts will supplement whatever I'm learning in the other science, technology, engineering, math curriculums.
Well, STEAM has been around for a long time. There is a national definition and a national standard that says it's arts. And the reason why they've been adding the A back in there is 3 or 4-fold. First of all, is when the economy goes flat and schools have to cut something, usually music and art go first. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there's always been, and there always, fortunately, will be in the next few years, a significant disparity between, as Michael put it, the women and minorities in STEM. It's one of my passions that I've been working on for, 20 years or more. And one of the things, however, as we've been increasing STEM, is the critical thinking piece, which is why a lot of even universities look for the word STEAM in some of the schools and look for their emphasis on that, because we're not necessarily now graduating holistic kids. And so they tell, journalism actually falls into the A, and writing falls into the A piece. It's not just your visual arts or whatever. It's about creating a holistic way of looking at things and enhancing your critical thinking, which is why STEAM has been so huge. The other thing is that in general, there's a lot of push from communities and parents and educators and stuff like that about the lack of emphasis in the arts from the early stages. It tends to be, there's a lot of school districts, and I know it varies here by elementary, middle school, and high school. We have math every day, we have this every day, and all that kind of stuff. And you do have basic English every day, but they don't have the arts or the incorporation of the arts every day, which helps with the creative or the critical thinking side of it. So there's been a push from a lot of communities and parents around the nation in the conferences that I go to say STEAM instead of STEM, because STEM seems, it's gotten the impression that STEM is so rigid. The engineering, the math, the science, that sort of thing. And the reason why we also brought E out a long time ago was because even though a lot of people argue that environmental is part of science, it really is a whole discipline unto itself. And so the school districts that are emphasizing environmental started with the E-STEM quite some time ago. So I think it tells a lot to the people coming in the community. And by adding the A there, we're not where we want to be right now in STEM, actually, with the integration piece. And you're never really where you want to be. It's a moving target. But I do believe that if we look at and we start to discuss the concepts of putting the A in there now rather than later, I think we're going to be ahead of the game on the emphasis for the holistic approach to education, as well as the well-roundedness, and as well as the impression and in our goals, how it translates into our goals. So, yeah, and, you know, the clarity around the A, I've never seen it mean activities, athletics, or academics, it's always meant arts. But the concept of art, like you said, it's not just drawing or whatever, it's the concept of creation, of communication, all that. That's the way it's defined at the national level, even with the Department of Education, so. So it's something that I think that, you know, are we ready for it? No. Should we start incorporating it sooner than later so we can build it into our objectives? I would say yes.
This district started with environmental education, and it was a slow start many years ago, and really took off once the Jeffers Foundation contacted us, and we started working with them, and it, in some ways it's just snowballed. It went really quickly. Slow to get into the high school, I believe, middle school, but the elementary, it went, you know, it was real popular. And it was more than just education in the classroom or outside of the classroom. It became a way to learn, a way of living. Kids took it home. They were educating their parents about environmental education and being wise stewards. We as a district started looking more at how we can be more economic, more efficient with what we had, our lights, our heat, our little refrigerators. I remember having the big discussion on those back in the day. So I mean, it became something that we all had an awareness. And then eSTEM came about. And I agree that eSTEM still needs more of a push. And I do think, especially from the female sector, it still needs that. And when I say that, I'm not disregarding the arts. I'm a strong believer in the arts. My kids participated, I did too. Interesting when you compare it with writing and journalism and things, because people don't think of it that way.
And language.
And language. You know, it's language arts, right? When we grew up, it was language arts. So I don't think it's being ignored. By putting the A in there, is that gonna make it more obvious that we're concentrating on it? I'm not so sure, I don't know yet either. So I guess, from what I'm hearing from everyone, just to summarize, that it needs more research. And I don't remember hearing at the strategic planning meeting, it come from the community that they wanted that A put in there. Not that they didn't like the arts, that was never said. But they were never brought up the idea of STEAM, at least not that I heard that night. So in order to be respectful of that process, I think we need to look more at how we want that to be. And you know, that doesn't mean the arts don't exist, doesn't mean we can't do more with them, as well as a lot of other things. And some things we don't even know about yet. So that's, I think, the direction that we would like to go in.
Lee, do we need to do anything formal in terms of learning more? Do we need to say at a board meeting we'd like to establish a committee that just learns more about it? Or can we just do that informally and sort of organically and learn more from our teachers? And what, you know, really clear out, like some of the definitions were important to me that I didn't understand about how it works, because it's never one at the expense of the other. You're right, it's all integration and learning. So in terms of board protocol, do we need to be any more?
I guess what we could do is give some direction to administration if they wanted to, you know, first of all, find out what do we have.
Yeah.
So we all do that. And I'm not sure from there, Stacey, Terry, how you would go about that.
Well, I think, so what I'm hearing, so just to finish, this was good. This helped clarify a lot for me. I think that I love what was stated about, even if the A isn't there right now, I don't want anybody in this room or anybody across the district to feel like arts aren't important in all the forms that Mary kind of talked about. So I want to be really careful that it's not, well, we're not as important, so we're not going to have the A. You know, I like the tenor of this conversation because I do not want the message out of this study session to be that the arts don't matter here. And I hope we've demonstrated through our programming and our support and offerings from world language to performing arts that it is a huge part of who we are and what we do. Our concerns, as we were talking about kind of a fast possible consideration of adding the A, was our district identity and branding. You know, I feel like even in the 4 years that I've been here, I feel like staff, high school and elementary, are just working harder and working more collaboratively on what does this mean, what can it look like, and I think that all comes together with how are we doing more project-based learning, how are we doing more integration and those kinds of things. So that was, you know, that was one of the concerns that we had about doing a change pretty fast without more study. Somebody said, and I didn't do it, so I don't know if it's true, but if you Google eSTEM, we're like the third thing that comes up. So I don't know, we can try that on our own time or see or whatever, but you know, so I think it says a lot about our branding and what's important to us. One of the other things that we talked about as an administrative team is we didn't want to put staff over the edge. We ask so much of our teachers and of our staff, and I feel like there's an amazing energy and buy-in and joy and challenge, I'm sure, integrating STEM and eSTEM into what we do, but I feel like staff are all in. I feel like they're working together, they're trying things, they're taking those risks, and I would like that to get even stronger, or I'd like them to be a part of this exploration of BA, so that if that time comes that you all give direction or say, hey, it's time, we've done some background work with our staff so that they're a part of that and can help us build whatever that would be with our community. And then it was, and I know, you know, people would say, well, we did talk about it at our table, but it wasn't one of the things that came out at that strategic planning process, so I also want to be sure that we honor that. So your conversation, that piece of it, oh, sorry, Jeff, thanks. Our recommendation, and certainly you're the ones giving direction, but as we thought about things, what we took a stab at that first strategic direction and changing the word a little bit. So it's a little long, but we felt like it helped us with that opportunity piece. So our recommendation is to change that to increase measurable student learning and reduce achievement gaps as we provide equitable student opportunities through personalized learning and student engagement. We felt that it maintains the measurable student learning, which I heard from the board, that's an important part of what we do. It talks about reducing the achievement gap, and it talks about the importance of providing equitable opportunities. So we don't talk about, per se, the opportunity gap, but we talk about the importance of equitable opportunities. And as our teaching and learning team has been working in, especially strategic direction number 1, our goal really is to keep moving the envelope on personalized learning and student engagement. So it's long, but that's kind of where we landed. We think it incorporates a lot of the work we do. Our recommendation is to keep 2 as it came out of the strategic planning process, 3 as it came out of the process and discussion, 4 keeping the eSTEM right now, and however we want to talk moving forward to not lose sight of what can we continue to learn and incorporate will be healthy for all of us. 5, taking your recommendation of wording around that social emotional, and then 6 as is. So we would be ready, unless you want additional conversation or you have different direction, to move these recommendations forward for board approval.
Any comments on changes? I think they look good. Going a little bit back, I don't feel like we answered Michael's question.
Yeah.
Or do you feel like it was answered?
I feel like it's sort of something we won't let go of. It doesn't have to be formalized yet, and I do agree starting with the teachers.
And I do want to be respectful of the administrators, that one more thing to do.
Exactly, and that's not what I'm looking for.
Okay.
Yep.
So as we can, we'll move forward with some discussion on that.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't want it to just be, we talked about it now, and then all of a sudden, a year later, we're like, hey, how did that ever go? So you know, part of what we'll bring back to you May-ish, June-ish, is what's the work under each of these. So I don't know if it's now, or if it becomes on our 2nd year of our operational plan, or 3rd year of our, whatever we think. But I think that's how you can hold me accountable to making sure that this is documented on either next year's or the following year's operational plan, that there's exploration or collaboration with teachers around that. So I think that would hold me accountable to, I think, the spirit of this conversation.
Everyone's comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
So you have everything you need?
I do.
Okay, move on to the program overview for Loyola Del Lago Spanish immersion.
I'm going to ask Richie Kuczynski to join us, and then Maggie Eckram, our data assessment coordinator, to join us up here as co-presenters. Kevin Schuttinger was here today. He's not feeling well, sent him home, but we'll try to do him proud with the presentation. Jim, you gotta stay. So,
I want my head in the way.
So our presentation tonight is going to be an overview of Loyola Del Lago. You know, as board members, we know that you've had some questions or people reach out to you recently about the program, and so we've spent some time putting together, you know, really a presentation for you this evening, somewhat to give you a history of the program, talk about some of the assessment scores that we have, and talk about the next steps as we continue with the program. So I'm going to start out, and I'm going to turn it over to Maggie to speak to some of the data, and Richie to talk to really some of the program components. But again, as a work session, we invite you as board members to ask questions and engage in the conversation around Loyola Del Lago. So with that, I already shared that. We're going to do our overview. Is this. So yeah, a little bit more specific. We'll talk immersion education, assessment, program components, next step. So the history, just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, really the 14-15 kindergarten class, Prior Lake Savage Area Schools offered a Spanish immersion program at Edgewood School. This was a board identified area of study to look at immersion education in the district. It also came in tandem with all-day kindergarten. At that time, the district offered half-day, but it was also looking too at the state offering all-day K, and so this sort of came in tandem together. And so we did have a committee that did look at immersion education. Part of this was founded too, if the Decision Resources Survey through Peter Leatherman, there were some questions in that survey seeking input around immersion education, several other things, and that was something that came back from the community that the district should explore an immersion program for the district. So that brief overview there. And so since 14-15, we've continued to add one grade level a year. We're currently in grades K4, with 5th grade being added into 19-20. Logistically, the overview of the program, it's aligned as a dual immersion program, begins with Spanish instruction at K. 90% of the day is in Spanish, 10% in English, and continues ultimately to be 50-50 by 5th grade.
Good evening. Thank you for having me here. So immersion education, you can Google immersion education, and it's been around for decades. So you know, it's kind of newer to the area here, kind of the South Metro across the river here, but we have many models that are currently in practice in Minnesota. But some of the research states that immersion education, students demonstrate flexibility in thinking and enhanced sensitivity to verbal and nonverbal cues. Picture yourself as a young 5-year-old entering into a classroom where you don't necessarily know word for word what the teacher's saying, so you're picking up on context clues and looking at body language, things like that. It also states that immersion education has an increase in job opportunities in many careers where they can contribute to the global economy. As you all know, our systems these days for education is to get students to think globally and beyond kind of themselves, and obviously when you speak a second language, you can inherently speak to more people, but you can also make more connections. You can understand different cultures, different worldviews, different points of view. Obviously able to travel and experience other cultures more meaningfully. It's always fun when we have a lot of the spring break time come up when a lot of our students travel, maybe to Mexico or Puerto Rico, and come back and report, and the parents are wowed, like, wow, my child was able to communicate and order food, and just really that neat thing to be able to see those connections being made. Achieve at high levels in all academic content areas. That's something very consistent across immersion education. And communicate with people he or she would otherwise not have a chance to know. So that's kind of the more higher view. What does it look like more at Lola del Lago? Which means wave of the lake, by the way, for any new board member. Immersion education. So we, as Jeff alluded to, we are kindergarten, first grade, 100% full immersion within the classroom of the homeroom. Students do have English in their specialist classrooms. And in kindergarten, kids take a lot of input, a lot of comprehensible input where the teachers are providing contextualized vocabulary, contextualized words, repetitions, so they can continue to build that. Students still do speak to their teacher in English, teacher responds in Spanish, and as the course of the year kind of goes, the students create more and more phrases and verbiage and things that they're able to do. By the time that we are in first grade, I would say the majority of our students are able to operate their entire day in Spanish, which is pretty amazing. If you don't believe me, come and see. It's a pretty amazing process that happens, and parents are just blown away by this. The teacher. The kids understand everything that's being said to them, they respond, but of course the teacher instructs them, how do you say something, how do you ask for a word if you don't know what that word means, or how do you describe it. There's a term in immersion education called circumlocution to describe the word if a child doesn't know what it is. But what this really means is midway through first grade, we have something called El Camino al Éxito, which means the walk of success. It's kind of it's a special event that we host in January. We just did it a few weeks ago, and it's kind of evolved over the years. But what it is, it's a celebration where the kids really promise and kind of make a commitment to speak only in Spanish during the school day, and they get really excited about it. We build it up. The past 3 years, we've had it at Hidden Oaks Middle School, Twin Oaks, in the theater there, and then we've had the kids have performed. A couple years ago, we had some cultural dancers, but then we have a nice community meal afterwards, and it's a real nice event. So that was in January. The other highlight I would like to say is our Amity International Intern Program. In some capacity, you've probably heard this being a success of our school. We're in our 4th year of offering that here for Lola del Lago. It's funded through our PTC, and what it is it's an exchange program. So we get applicants from Spanish-speaking countries. Most of them had kind of just graduated from college, and they're looking to kind of go abroad for a year. So they apply. We look at their criteria. We interview them. We do a Skype thing. We kind of find a fit, and what they do is then they come and live with a family from our school. Ideally, we try to do 2 host days, and then they work in the school as kind of teaching assistants, and then they help out with a lot of things. Help out a lot in kindergarten the first month, but then they really are involved in all the classrooms, and it's a very successful program. This year we have 5. We have 2 from El Salvador, 2 from Colombia, and 1 from Spain. So so you get a nice mix of accents, you get a nice mix of the authentic culture that's out there. This is something I'm really proud of. On our staff, just in our teachers and our paraprofessionals, we have 8 Spanish-speaking countries represented just on our team alone. So that's kind of a neat little cultural component that we like to talk about. And how do you say this in Spain versus how do you say this in Mexico? So those are some things. And then another really cool partnership that we have is a partnership with our Spanish 6 program. Since we opened, Maria Brown at the high school had a Spanish 5 program, and we had Spanish 5 students would come over 2 or 3 times a year and plan little activities, prepare some learning games and songs, and it was a really neat experience. Last year, so the 17-18 school year, she had enough students to run a Spanish 6 class, which has never been run in Prior Lakes High School. And her and I kind of brainstormed what this could look like, and we came up with it's a hybrid program where they do their 6 kind of part of their classes online, and then in the classroom, and then 2 days a week they actually come over to Lola del Lago for 45 minutes. So they have to sign in and check in and out. It's part of their homework, and they collaborate with the teacher, and they work with our students for twice a week. And it's a great partnership because not only does it allow some more Spanish-speaking support in the classroom, it also provides the high school students an authentic context to use their Spanish, which they may not have done outside of the classroom in Prior Lake. So it's been a really, really neat program. The first year, I think we had 12 students that did it, and this year we have about 18 that are participated in that, so we're very proud of that. Community survey, our community survey stakeholder survey results. In 2017, 2018, the district-wide community stakeholder survey went out. Just wanted a couple highlights. We had 99 responses. 95% of families agreed or strongly agreed that their child receives a quality education at Lola del Lago. 92% agree or strongly agreed that they are satisfied with their child's educational experience. 2016, 2017 survey data, we had 83 responses. 93% said they agree or strongly agree that their child receives a quality education. 93% agree or strongly agree that they are satisfied with their child's educational experience. So some nice highlights there. And then finally, kind of the enrollment history. So as Jeff alluded to, we started with kindergarten. We used to be 4 teachers, myself and a secretary, and now we are 353 students. We're 16 classroom teachers and a staff of about 40, which includes social worker and nurse and child nutrition services and all of it. So you can see the growth, and we're excited to add 5th grade next year will be a full elementary.
We did a deep dive into the assessment data we have at Lola del Lago, and we have some different portions of that to share with you. So first, very briefly, we give students something called the MAP test, which is Measures of Academic Progress. And it is put out by an organization that was built by teachers. It's nationwide. Millions of students take it every year. It uses a RIT scale, which is kind of a unique way of scoring. If a 2nd grader earns a 201 RIT score, it's the same thing as a 5th grader earning a 201. They would both be ready to learn the same thing. It's just the 2nd grader might be right on target and the 5th grader might be a little bit behind. So it's kind of a different way of looking at scores. So that's the age and grade level independence of that piece. It's computer adaptive, so as you get a question right, the next question is a little more challenging. If you get that right, it gets a little more challenging. If you get one incorrect, it will get a little bit easier, and it'll just keep kind of going up and down like that until you're done with the assessment. It is administered in English to students at Lola del Lago in both reading and in math, fall, winter, spring, so 3 times a year. One piece of understanding this is why give the students another assessment? They already have quite a few. And the answer there is MAP scores do a really good job of predicting how students will do on the MCAs. In front of you, you have correlation values, and basically it's a scale of 0 to 1. 0 is there's no relationship. 1 would be there's a perfect relationship between the 2 things we're talking about. So looking at MAP and MCA together, what we end up with, it's different for every grade level, but in the chart in the lower right there, we get correlation numbers of 0.9, 0.92, 0.85, I think is that's the lowest. So we're getting a really high value for predictive nature of the MAP assessment. So basically, if we utilize the MAP assessment in the fall, we get a prediction for the MCAs. We get an even closer one in the winter, and then in the spring, it'll oftentimes get even closer to what we get on the MCAs. The next 3 graphs are about reading. We have each grade level cohort for you. So current 2nd graders have only taken the test 1 time. They're in the middle of taking their winter test. We don't have any data about that yet. But current 2nd graders, I wanted to take a look at where students at Lola del Lago fell compared to nationally and compared to the district. So the yellow is the national, just 50th percentile for reference. The blue is Lola del Lago at 53rd percentile, and then the district came in at the 55th percentile, so not a big difference at all. 3rd graders have taken the test more. They've had that additional year. So we put these 3 data points up, starting with fall and spring of their 2nd grade year, and then the fall of their 3rd grade year. Again, we have that red line as of the district, which is just staying at 63 steadily. And Loyola del Lago, we had a slight increase from the 50th percentile to the 53rd percentile in their second grade year. And then they jumped up the fall of their third grade year to the 72nd percentile. Same thing again, this time fourth grade cohort. With the district, we were fairly flat there at the 60th, went up to the 63rd, stayed around there. With Loyola del Lago, in second grade, students' scores decreased about 10 points, 10 percentile points. Then they came back after summer in the fall, and we made that up and then gained a little bit. So they were up in the 46th percentile. Over the course of the year, they went up to the 48th percentile. And then coming back in the fall, in fourth grade, they were at the 59th percentile, so they are approaching where the district is located.
But you also see here too, is we see sort of a reverse sometimes when it comes to data, particularly with this cohort, is sometimes we worry about summer regression when it comes to assessments. That doesn't seem to be the case with this cohort and in some of the other areas we're looking at. We're not seeing regression at all. We're actually seeing some pretty big growth over the summer, and we still need to spend a little bit more time looking at that to understand what is the nature of that, because that is the reverse of what we sometimes would anticipate with that summertime off. So I'm not sure as board members, as you look there, if that was something that you picked out as well. But you'll also see this in a future graph here.
Mm-hmm. So we move on to math then. Second grade, current second graders, they ended up in the 52nd percentile with the district in the 58th percentile. So again, not a tremendous difference. Third graders, compared to the district, which has gone up 4 percentile points over that year and a half, they kind of flatlined during their second grade year. And then they went up from the 58th to the 74th percentile when they came back in the fall in third grade. So again, we're seeing that pattern that will need more exploration. And our current fourth grade students, again, the district is kind of up in the 66th up to the 70th percentile there and 73rd. And we see this actually really interesting pattern again. In second grade, we started at 52nd down to the 43rd, and then we gained that back in the following fall of third grade, 57th, 48th in the spring, and then we jumped up to 61st percentile in fourth grade. So there's that pattern that needs explanation again for us.
So one of the things that we're looking at, particularly with winter map right now, is looking to see, particularly with third and fourth grade, are we seeing that downward trend again mid-year? And I believe, are they taking the winter map?
They're supposed to tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'll be in the very near future. In the next
Probably
couple
won't be
weeks.
tomorrow.
Yeah.
No.
Most likely not Wednesday either. So here in the next,
2 weeks.
2 weeks, we will be having students participate in that winter map to see if this is a trend that continues or if for some reason the trend would be changing. So that 3 times a year looking at fall and spring, but also paying closer attention to winter is something that we need to certainly do, because that's going to help teachers identify and target instruction for the rest of the year.
Another piece of assessment data that we look at is the Fontes and Pinnell benchmark assessment system. So if you've ever heard students come home and say, I'm reading at a level E, or I've increased my reading level, that's what they're talking about here. For fourth graders, when we administer the Fontes and Pinnell at Loyola del Lago in Spanish, what we want students to be is at a level M or greater, and 35.4% of students were at that point in the fall. They are also in the middle of this assessment right now, so we don't have winter data yet, but that's another thing that we will take a look at. Then we wanted to make sure, in addition to making certain students are fluent in Spanish and can read in Spanish, we also want them to be able to read in English. So the Fontes and Pinnell in English would need to be at a level P or greater in order to be on target, and that was 37.9% of students. And then we kind of did a comparison with the district. If we administer the Fontes and Pinnell, how many students are at that level P or greater, and it was about 3/4 of the students.
So we're seeing some gaps, particularly with where we would want and expect student proficiency to be in English with, with several of our student groups. And those are things that we're certainly going to work to address.
The nice thing about this assessment, as well as the MAP test, it's not just a test we get, okay, the classroom's on track, or the classroom isn't on track, or the grade level. It's very specific to what skills students need, what they're ready to learn next, concepts they're struggling with, what they need an extension on. So it's very targeted to the student to help them get to the next level. We took a look at how the last year's predictions for grade 3 last year, how the MAP scores predicted MCA scores. And as I said before, there's a pretty tight correlation with that prediction. When we looked at Loyola Del Lago in math, the prediction based on the winter map, so a year ago at this time, was 54.3% of students would be proficient on the MCA. The actual was 56.4%, so pretty good predictor. Compared to district-wide, the prediction was 79.2%. The actual was 78.9%. Similarly with reading, we took a look at that. MCA prediction based on winter map was 44.1% at Loyola Del Lago. The actual MCA was 38.2%. District-wide, the prediction was 58.6%, and the actual was 66.7%.
So we're seeing a tighter correlation with math relative to MAP and MCA versus reading in both groups.
Then we took a look at, as a grade level, what are the areas that students tend to struggle with the most? Where are they doing really well? So we can help to target specific grade levels if that's something that we need based on the, where we are in the curriculum. In the fall of this year, second graders' strength area was vocabulary acquisition and use. And again, this is in English, so that was, I didn't predict that that was what that was going to be, but it was vocabulary acquisition and use was their strength. The area of opportunity for them was informational text, which is often what we see in second grade. Third grade, strengths were informational text and literature, so we're kind of flip-flopping now. And their opportunity area was vocabulary acquisition and use. And then in fourth grade, the area of strength was literature, opportunity, informational text, and vocabulary acquisition and use. So it's kind of an interesting overall. This is a report we get from the Department of Education. Basically what it does is it takes specific standards and it tells us in the area of number and operation, or algebra, or geometry and measurement, or data analysis for math, those 4 areas, it tells us where students did even better than the state predicted they would do, and where they didn't do as well as the state predicted. So all of those blue triangles that you see are areas where Loyola Del Lago did exactly within the range of what the state predicted on the MCAs for math. The green squares are the areas that they did better than the state had predicted. And the red circles that I've got highlighted in yellow, those are areas that they did not do as well. So we get this report for reading and math, all the grade levels, all the buildings, and it's a really great way to target specifically, was there a specific standard that students struggled with the most? If so, how can we help the next batch of students coming up, and how can we help the students that have moved on to the next grade level?
One thing too is not all tests are created equally at the grade levels. So you can see in third grade number and operation, you can see the number of questions. relative to algebra and data analysis. The amount that students are to know are less given their age as they go into 4th and 5th grade. Certainly the test is going to adjust per the state standards of what students are expected to know, and they'll be tested more on those.
Then we took a look at that, using that report. How did current 4th graders do with respect to strengths and opportunities on the MCAs? Did that match map? How did it compare to the district? So areas of strength that students had, demonstrating understanding of the text, referring to the text and answers, determining the meaning of words and phrases as they're used in the text, non-literal language, as well as the meaning of general academic and domain-specific words was, again, a strength. Anytime you see the asterisk, like in front of that middle one in the strengths area, that's an area that Loyola Del Lago matched up with the district as far as having a strength or an opportunity in that particular standard. So we took a look at math as well, same exact sort of analysis we went through. 2nd graders in the fall, algebra was their area of strength. Areas of opportunity, number and operation, and data analysis. And data analysis comes up very frequently in the area of opportunity column for all grade levels. Strength for 3rd graders was data analysis. Opportunity was, again, number and operation and geometry and measurement this time. And 4th grade algebra, and then opportunity was data analysis. And sometimes we see these different things come up based on when they're taught in the year. So that sometimes has a component that's involved. We took a look at MCA math, strengths, real world mathematical problems. Another strength that was in common with the district, using addition and subtraction for those real world math problems, and using strategies to determine the answer. Relationships among units of time was a strength throughout the district, including Loyola. Areas of opportunity, fractions, that's a pretty standard 3rd grade area of opportunity, is that fractions piece. Writing numbers with multiple digits, place value, ordering and comparing unit fractions, again, that's in common with the district, and identifying parallel and perpendicular lines.
Okay, so the question kind of bodes like, what do we do, and kind of what professional development does the district teaching and learning department provide? What do we do at the building? So one of the things that we've done specifically for our 4th grade, because again, this is our first cohort through the system, and this is the only MCA historical data that we have. So we take that data, and what we do is we have data days. We have an example of what a data session looks like coming up here in a second. But what that is it's a time with a peer coach, myself and our teachers, and we take all of this data. We take our map, we take our MCA, we take our Fountas and Pinnell, we take a lot of the common grade level things, and we look at them, and we start to really figure out, as Jeff alluded to, where are some of the gaps? Where are we seeing that our kids aren't making as much gains as we had hoped? Or what, maybe there's a group of 5 students that need to be pushed in a little bit more. So it kind of goes both ways, and we kind of create, we call them strategy groups, we call them differentiated instruction, but we do that, we've done that twice this year. We create reading strategy small groups based upon that data, so we might take a group of students who have made, we look at their Fountas and Pinnell data and their MAP data, we might see that a group of 5 or 6 students have made relatively no progress. Maybe they're stagnant. So why is that? What do we do with that? We talk about those kids, and we try to align the resources that we have to make sure that they're able to get the instruction that they need. And again, the same thing goes for students that were maybe achieving on the higher level. Maybe they haven't made as much growth as we would have hoped. So what are we going to do to challenge them? We specifically for 4th grade, we provided 2 planning days back in May, and then 2 this fall. And that was with our curriculum specialist, our math specialist from the teaching and learning department, as well as our district naturalist, to kind of look at curriculum, share resources, talk about what things are available through the district. But when you're planning a new grade level, there's a lot to look at. And then some of it too, we have to either translate into Spanish or look at what resources are available, and kind of we do that. Professional development and teaching and learning team. We have ongoing professional development. I can say firsthand how much support we've received from the teaching and learning department. We have Fountas and Pinnell assessment systems. We've had probably 3 or 4 times when our teachers have come together and talked about how to administer the test, how to glean information and data from the test. You know, you look at accuracy, you look at what word patterns kids might be struggling with. You look at the comprehension piece, what questions are you asking? Sometimes just a general question for a student, they might give you an answer, but how do you dig a little deeper to ensure that they're actually understanding what they're reading? Words Their Way is a spelling program that we've incorporated. The Laker math page is a genuine resource for all of our district, but to really target some of that math instruction, that's been a big support for our immersion students. And then supplementing some of the English curriculum with some of the existing reading units of study. That is what our district uses for their language arts curriculum, but supplementing some of that as we get into the older grades as they add more English. And then of course participating in literacy labs. Fountas and Pinnell reading assessments in English, and then the implementation of reading comprehension strategy small groups.
So one of the things too with professional development feels, I mean, like a lot of front ending. You know, staff is working with staff and, you know, day-to-days as well as, you know, creating groups. But one of the reasons too is also, another way that we also support staff is as they're actually instructing or teaching or implementing. Our peer coaches are conducting observations, giving reflective feedback. I know Richie, you as well as all of our elementary principals do walkthroughs to ensure that strategies that are being provided to staff are being implemented to fidelity. And then also as assessments are being done in the classroom, looking at the data. Is the assessment data that we're giving in classrooms matching what we're seeing with some of the groups? And I know you keep referencing 4th grade, but this is for all over the library, correct?
Yes,
So this
yes.
isn't just a 4th grade specific plan.
Yeah.
This also is something that is available to all teachers ongoing throughout the year.
Okay, so what are we looking towards second semester? So taking the data that we get, we're excited we're adding a new benchmark advanced English ebook program. It has 3,500 titles to choose from. It can be accessed at home as well. So we're excited to add that to our resources. There is a program called Headsprout. It's an adaptive English program. It's very similar. It kind of finds students where they're at their level and then asks them comprehension questions, which is aligned to MCAs and to MAP scores. And it's evidence-based per the What Works Clearinghouse. As a school, K-4 school, as we grow, we're looking at reviewing and clarifying some of our homework expectations and guidelines just to ensure that we're making sure to have that grow through the system. Again, data sessions, we're doing that in the upcoming weeks here with each grade level. Continue to redefine differentiated reading groups based upon the winter and MAP data, as well in math and in reading. Next steps, we are adding 5th grade. We have our current job posting out there for high quality language immersion teachers. So we're looking at adding that staff. Of course, over the next several months, we'll be looking at purchasing curriculum, adding resources, and then professional development for that, and then how we can plan for the summer going into 5th grade. But then of course it goes the next step, what happens after 5th grade? We've already started the process of looking at some of the neighboring middle school immersion programs. Again, like I alluded to earlier, there are many immersion schools in the metro that have a K-12 immersion program. So I've already reached out to several districts, and we've kind of got some of our, find some of the common themes. And then of course we'll look at, we've already started the process with Mr. Edwards and Mr. Kuznetsov about offering what 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade looks like for immersion programming once our kids get there. It's hard to believe that they'll be there, but we want to make sure to kind of be out in front of that. Questions?
Any questions? It's a lot of information.
Yes.
Super lot of information.
Yes.
We were looking at the map, the MCA scores between the district and the state. Where do we compare against other immersion programs right now?
Right. I would say we're a little bit lower than, and you know, we want to get those scores up, definitely, so we're looking at that. But again, with our 3rd grade, that's our first historical data that we have, so we're looking at planning for this coming spring for that.
Another question?
Well, I just, on the, you know, on the English reading, when I looked at it, it also looked like when you say technical, am I interpreting that correctly to say grammar, like, you know, punctuation, and it talked about series, historical events in a series, is that, am I interpreting that to say it's punctuation, or is that something different?
It could be a little bit of that, yeah. It's
Okay.
like one of the things that we need to teach is some of the, you know, as students are in K-1, 2, you know, obviously their primary instruction is in Spanish, so we look at some of the things that don't exist in Spanish, like contractions, or, you know, use of, like I would say the possessive, like in Spanish you would say like, la casa de mi abuela, like the house of my grandma, so you'd say my grandma's house. So just some of those types of things that we have to explicitly teach in English.
So grammatical might be part of it. I think as we look at some of the, you know, substrands too, literacy is more fiction, informational text is nonfiction. And so, you know, some of those things with nonfiction components are what we see district-wide, but certainly when we're looking at, I would imagine with immersion too, when you get to non-tech, you know, informational text, you're talking about science, social studies, the historical connections there too. Kids need more experiences with that.
You know, and generally when you're talking grammar and then you're talking math, what happens, I mean, if you look at other immersion schools, what happens when they go and they transition into middle school? Is there a gap there that they have to get caught up on, or how does that work between the learning?
It's a great question. That's a great question. So there's lots of research, and again, that we see that kids, when they're in 3rd, 4th grade, they are a little bit, you know, kind of below their peers, and we're pretty upfront with parents when they start that journey in kindergarten. But by the time they are 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, they really do catch up to their peers, again, with the English standardized test scores in both math and reading.
So Richard, you said you need to work on getting those scores up. So how do you go about that? I mean, do you have all this data? Do you look at each individual student and figure out what you need to do? And could you kind of walk us through what that looks like?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So again, I kind of referenced some of our data sessions. And teachers, again, they do this all the time in their learning teams. It's a weekly process where they look at the current and most recent data that they have. But what they do then is they look at each individual student and they say, you know, where is this student making progress? Where is this student stagnating? Where is this student need a little extra push? And then teachers, you know, again, with myself, their peer coach, at grade level teams, they look at what resources they have. They look at what, you know, book clubs they might need to work on, or what strategy groups, and then they really target that instruction to those students. So you might hear a term called like guided reading, or you might hear terms like differentiated instruction, or so basically, you know, in any given classroom, you know, teachers are always teaching to 4, 5, 6, 7 different levels of students, and sometimes it's a one-on-one group with a student. Sometimes it's a group of 5 or 6 students that need that extra thing, that extra kind of focus in that area. The other thing on how we, Jeff alluded to, how we ensure that happens is teachers are bringing their data to learning teams. They're looking at their, we have some students that they do weekly check-ins with, progress monitoring to see if they're making growth and hitting those targets. We have a reading intervention teacher that we use too that kind of does some of that. But also a lot of it too is just myself, the peer coach, in the classrooms, observing, asking questions, saying, hey, how did that go with that student? Tell me more about that. How can we support? And just really getting students to talk about the students and their learning and how they are progressing, where they need some more support, like that. Did that answer your question?
Yes, mostly. You know, granted, I mean, short of having one-on-one, you know, education and endless resources, and I guess this is for Jeff too, the resources that you have when you need peer coaches and things, and either to help the teacher or to help the student learn better. Do we have something similar in the general population of the students, Jeff? Or does everybody have that same opportunity? Does Spanish immersion need more of that because it's a whole different concept for me? Or is there that access all over? You know, when kids need help, do we have those resources within reason, I guess? So
when we look at resources for students from an intervention, you know, our staff are provided, you know, professional development. Students have same opportunities. They're not denied any access. It's very commensurate across the district as far as access and information and resources. So there isn't anything out of the ordinary. However, it is, you know, when we're looking at a program as we continue to build into it, you know, this is a cohort of student I think we have to look at too, as a brand new program. We haven't aged out yet. We haven't really understood our district trend. Right now we're looking at cohort, and you know, certain cohorts may need something a little different. And then, so I appreciate, you know, some of the work that Richie and his team have done, looking at bringing in those additional book titles and resources, and then looking at homework. And I know that was something that was not aligned with some of our district work, so that, you know, as we look at homework and some of those other components, again, it's another way to support kids, another way to get kids additional practice in some of those concepts in math and reading.
I think that's why, you know, Mary, your question about where are we in comparison with other immersion schools, we are lower right now. And what we don't have is another immersion school that started 4 years ago that we're comparing to. So, but we're still looking at that, saying, you know, we are lower. We knew the Spanish, the Lola del Lago students would be lower perhaps in 3rd and 4th grade, and then start making that gain. But that's one of the reasons that the analysis, I think, on the math data, and really waiting on that January data to see, because I think that's going to help us with, say, okay, what else do we need to be doing? If the predictability mid-year is such that we don't think we're going to make those gaps for the MCAs, you know, fill those gaps, what else do we need to be doing? Back to your question about how are we looking at specific skill deficiencies, or where kids haven't yet learned in each of those standards that you saw from that other report, the math report that Maggie had.
So when you get the math results back from, that they're taking, I guess, now.
Not tomorrow, but
Yeah.
soon.
Right, yeah, pretty soon. How much time do you need to transition in order to help with those gaps? Is that something you can make a curriculum change mid-year?
They're instantaneous. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what's so nice about the math.
And it's so
You'll get
personalized
scored exactly
to each student. So it shows exactly like those different trends, those strand data, where each child might need it, where they're, you know, it rates them as low, average, high average. So you get your groups right there saying, okay, these 5 kids really need some support with algebra. What resources can we continue to add and target that instruction for that?
Okay, I guess maybe I need to rephrase my
Yep.
question, but thank you for the answer. That did clarify one piece of it. When you get these results back and seeing that the scores are, you know, quite a bit lower than the district, et cetera, still, how quickly can those curriculum changes and the extra resources that Lee referred to, et cetera, can be put into place? Because, you know, obviously this is the first time we've been through it, but the majority of these kids within 6 months to a year and a half are going to be in with the mainstream middle school. And granted, you're making changes to accommodate for additional language and so they don't lose it, et cetera, but what can we do in the math and the reading? And then of course they're going to be tested next in science, correct? If that's the next MCA. And so you're going to have another adjustment. How soon, or what is your, you know, planning going into making those adjustments, and how fast can you make them, and do you need other resources?
Yeah, like I said, we're really eager to get the mid-year winter math results back, because I think that will show us. I mean, where's all of our cohorts of kids, but where specifically are some of those groups, because that's what we will use to make those decisions, and or say, hey, we need some more, you know, resources here, or we need to target some more instruction here and focus some more resources to
I think it's an ongoing conversation. I mean, one thing too is looking at our assessment data and implementing the curriculum resources we have. But I think too, we don't want to put the notion out there, well, we're going to wait for the next testing event to really tell us what to do. I mean,
Kind of what I was going for also.
Yeah, you know, as we get the information and data, I mean, this is something that district-wide we look at. It's a place that helps us understand students, but we also have, you know, classroom-based assessments as well. You know, again, it gets down to, you know, where students are at implementing those components. You know, I think as we look at those trends and look at those look at additional assessments, if there's additional resources, that has to be an ongoing conversation. Same thing with our staff. We expect our staff to be saying, you know, this is where this group of students needs some support here, we need to shift this around. And those are types of things that can happen weekly or daily in order to ensure that kids are getting the right instruction at the right time. There's nothing hindering staff from being able to do that.
My personal experience, and which we've talked over the years, is that the immersion students actually tend to be, in the long run, much more proficient in all the areas. Because their brains have been taught to think in different ways, and because they're using them differently, and they're able to create patterns also much easier for math and for science, etc. But you know, you don't want to stigmatize a child coming out of a program that may be a little bit behind when they go into a transition year, like junior high, and then stick them, let's say, in a lower level course. Because then you can also, again, stigmatize them so they never actually move out of that level. So are we developing a transition plan thinking of in those terms?
Correct, yes.
Any other questions? Stacy?
Yeah, I have a couple. I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So MCAs are once a year, correct?
Correct.
And what is it? What time of year? December?
That is in spring.
Spring.
Yeah, April.
So would that be before our spring math testing?
Yes.
Before or after?
Before. We do the MCAs and then attempt to give the kids a break if at all possible, which is tough, and then they do the spring map. So they're pretty close together, but the MCAs are first.
I was just trying to see the correlation, you know, with the third grade reading score that we had for MCAs and how it correlates to the map. You know, you know, because it looked like your correlation worked quite a bit, but when it came to this specific one, it seems like it was down quite a bit. And it's looking like we're addressing needs by the fact that it's going up. I mean, I want to make sure that, you know, we're continuing this trend. I see it like, it seems like the fourth grade cohort has been a little up and down a little bit more than the other groups. And so I'm just wondering, well, that's compared to like the third grade group, that's got more of a steady, you know, is that something that, you know, programmably we're addressing so that there's consistency, you know what I mean, as far as, you know, what we're doing with curriculum or PD. I mean, I just want to make sure we're giving it its good due here of what needs to be done. Because I mean, honestly, you know, what's an acceptable level to be behind? Is my, you know, I mean, what is an acceptable level, I guess? I mean, and I understand the fourth grade group's the first group to go through and kind of the guinea pigs, but, you know, we have to get to a point where, what are we telling parents at orientation? Like what, you know, so we don't have this, you know, a response of, okay, this is okay or this isn't okay. And I just have some concerns as to, you know, I think we're addressing it, but I just want to make sure that we're addressing it as quickly as we need to. Because there is we're going to middle school, there is, you know, what's happening, you know, with my kids. And I know we're working on it, but I want to make sure we're working on it with the speed as to which we need to be working on it. And another clarifying question is, you talked about English. So I know we worked through a 90-10 to a 50-50 by fourth grade, is that right?
Fifth grade, yeah. Fifth grade?
So what happens what's that fourth grade then? Are we 50-50 or are we not 50-50?
60-40.
60-40, so it gradually,
Yep.
and you said it's specialists is where we start with English?
So in kindergarten, first grade, it's 90%, 10% English.
Right.
So 10% is in specialists.
Okay. And then as we transition, what are we transitioning? Like when are you having English for English?
So it would start by second grade.
Okay.
That increases to 20%, third grade is 30%.
But there's an English class then?
There would be English embedded.
It starts second semester of second grade. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, so they're adding words programs, some reading, and then just in terms of like, so when you look at like English language arts, there's, you know, you look at just some independent reading for kids on their own, some targeted instruction, just some real louds as teachers do that more and more.
And is that what we've had from the beginning? Like, so, I mean, do the current fourth graders get that in second grade?
We did start Words Their Way in second grade
Okay.
with our current fourth graders. But we did, we have added, our social studies curriculum has always been in English.
Okay. What else was the other question? Okay, so as far as models, I mean, is there certain models out there as far as immersion? I mean, is this a specific model that says, is this the, you know what I'm saying? Is there other programs, like, are there other programs where they start teaching English a little bit earlier than second grade, or, I mean?
Yeah, so I mean, again, that was, every year we've looked at other immersion schools. I think every year I have a consortium of about 12 immersion principals that I contact, and we say, hey, when do you start English? How much English do you do? And in terms of too, like what resources do you use? What curriculum packages you have? And it's kind of all over. I'd be happy to share that with you if you want some time. But the majority is either right kind of in second grade, or some don't actually start until third grade. And some, it kind of varies. Some might do English language arts all the way up to 90 minutes, just the English language arts block in fifth grade. Some do some subjects. They might do math in English. So it all kind of depends. I mean, as Jeff kind of alluded to, there's different program models out there too, based upon some student populations. But I'd be happy to either bring that to a meeting or share that with you.
I mean, I was just curious, I mean, if it's something, I know you're looking at it, if there's tweaks that we need to do, if it's something, learning from, programs that have been around in existence longer, if they're having a little bit more success because they're starting something a little sooner or doing something a little different, I think you definitely learn from, obviously the more experienced. And then I know this has been brought up a couple times, but has there been thought given to doing a type of independent audit at all of the program? Just, I know we do it with some of our other programs as far as, if there's tweaks or things that we can do.
Not at this time. There hasn't been a consideration of an audit.
So as far as timing, so I want to, if I was going to make a prediction then, based on this, of what our math and MCA, our math and reading scores based on what we have predicted this fall. So I mean, we've had some pretty good results here, as far as, if I'm reading this correctly. We should have just taken we're taking our math test.
Yep,
Sure.
we're
I
gonna
just
take
wanna
it
get the timing
we're
right.
gonna be taking it in the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
So
And
we'll
then-
have another data point to see, are we on track to have a higher predictability of success on the MCAs, or did that slide back?
Michael?
I'd just like to add to that, in addition to all the great data that you put together, I want to thank you for that. That was a time-consuming project, and it's really helpful to see it. I know community members have also shared data from their own research with us. I did some visiting with 2 representatives from the Minnesota Department of Education who do the Minnesota Report Card and look at all of that data, and I asked about, first of all, underscoring your point that if you're a new program, you need to look at new programs when you compare scores. But you said a key thing, and that is a new program that started 4 years ago. What I found out was when I said, well, if our scores in second year of our new program don't match these scores from this program in their second year that started 15 years ago, how do we do that? And she threw a lot of caution my way. Because the standards change that they test for, you cannot compare test scores from a new program, year 2, whatever, to one that started 5 years earlier, for example. So I did some digging into those charts that were given to us, and I did some digging, and I think that I want to keep that perspective on the table for us too. As we learn from those models and look where our gaps are, I want to be careful how we manage our data and make decisions and conclusions from that. So.
Enrique?
Yeah, I have a whole series of questions. I've been trying to gather them. Thank you for all of this data. Thank you. We'll start there. So looking at the grade 4 cohort, I know we're hitting that one fairly hard, so we'll go there one more time. They're progressing together as you develop the program together. Is the instruction or the instructors, are they also progressing along with that same cohort and essentially developing or paving the way for those other students. I'm just trying to find different ways to explain why the up and down.
Yeah, so I mean, again, the kind of the inherent of being a new cohort, new grade level. Even though we have had, I've been intentional to try to move some experienced teachers who have been, at our school, so know the ins and outs. The grade level sometimes is new to that teacher, so they're working through some of those things, and that's the case this year too. So.
Okay. Because my concern there is, they're doing great, and clearly the work is paying off for the lower grades. But I want to make sure that this group of students, they're also getting the benefit and not just paving the way for other people to benefit from whatever their experiences are as that program grows and develops. Which leads me to a second question of the peer reviews or the peer coaching that you have. Is that with other peers within the school district, or are you looking at peers from other immersion schools to also come in and help provide some guidance there?
Yeah, we've done a lot of so peer-to-peer, yes. So that happens just in terms of like, I'm a grade level partner with Maggie. I share my ideas. That's kind of happens with the learning team. But we've also done a lot of, and then of course we have our peer coach who.
Which you might want to help
clarify.
give some context to the peer coach.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. So the peer coach is it's a teacher. Her name is Molly Halloran. She's been working with us, and she provides has a lot of literacy background. She works with all of our teachers, all of our grade levels, to set goals, to do some model teaching, to actually go into the classroom, provide some feedback. And then to also kind of do some reflection with all of our teachers in terms of how they are progressing, what goals they're looking on, what areas of, where they want to continue to improve their practice. The other part of it too is.
I just wanted to explain to Enrique and to Michael, that's district-wide.
Right.
We have, okay, I just want to make sure you knew that. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes, and then in terms of connecting with other immersion schools, we've been very active in terms of in terms of how we set our teachers up. So every year we've sent our teachers. There's a program through the University of Minnesota called the Center for Academic Research and Language Acquisition. It's called CARLA, they call it, and they offer New Teacher Immersion 101. Since the beginning, we've frequently sent our teachers that are able to attend. It's a week-long summer. We pay the way for that to go. We also are our school is part of something called the Minnesota Advocates for Immersion Network. It's a networking group of Metro immersion educators and schools. Our school's been a part of that since the beginning. They offer 2 to 3 professional development events per year at free for all teachers to attend. There was one in May or December, and then there's one coming up in February that our teachers are able to attend, but they make connections with other immersion educators and keep that on. We've done a couple Skype actually learning teams with some of our teams at Lola Dago. We actually did that with Rochester a couple years ago, just to kind of share some ideas and meet some new faces. We have sent our Lola Dago teachers every year to visit other immersion schools. So I know last year our groups went to a couple schools in Minnetonka, they went to South Washington County and West Fronteras, and they went to Forest Lake. And we've done that every couple years. We've also had many other immersion schools come and visit us to say, hey, what are you doing? How does your program model look like? And we're going to provide some feedback on that.
But formal mentoring haven't. I mean, like they're not paired up with a teacher from another district.
Correct. Yes, correct. Yeah.
And the specific peer coach at Lola del Lago was placed there because she has expertise in literacy. So we saw that from the MCA scores that they weren't as high as we would have liked to have seen them. So that was, the decision was made to put her there to support teachers in the literacy piece.
FOMPTES and Pinnell benchmark assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Could you cover that one more time real briefly?
Just like what it is, or?
I'm just struggling. I'm trying to wrap my brain around the expectation. Whether the test is administered in Spanish, then the expectation is that the student will be at a grade level M, which is, kind of do a little bit of digging to find that, but basically second grade level. But I don't understand it. If the test is administered in Spanish, are you saying that the reading proficiency in Spanish should be at essentially second grade or fourth grader, or is that?
That's a really great, I can definitely answer that. Yeah, I can see how that would be. need some clarification. So the Fountain System Pinal benchmark system runs in English, runs levels A to Z, and that's district-wide. All of our students take that. Fountain System Pinal in Spanish, the Spanish version, is only available A to N in Spanish. However, we found that we don't have actual norms for that Fountain System Pinal system of where we want our, let's say, our end of year first graders to be. So we've always kind of set that goal as we have gone, and we look at all of our students and we say we believe they should be at a level D by the end of second grade. That's just, or first grade, that's just an example. But what we do is we really try to look at where all of our students are at, where we hope to get them. This year we have a comprehensive K4 and going into fourth grade Fountain System Pinal Spanish guide. It's a little bit different in terms of some of the levels where they're at. When you saw the English up there a little bit, that was the first time our students had been, our fourth grade students or any of our students had been given that F&P test in English. So that was some really great data to take from that. The other thing I would like to say too is during the 17-18 school year, we did try a different, so again, looking, going back to what other immersion schools do. Some schools do F&P, some use different systems. We tried a system called ENIL. For a year, it was a different leveling system, and we actually did that during the 17-18 school year. We just said, let's try this one, and it's very similar in terms of what it looked like. It just had different numbers and matrices and benchmarks, and we did that for the 17-18 school year. We found it to be valuable, but we found that the range didn't give us as much information as we had hoped. So this year, again, coming back into the 18-19 school year, we're going back to F&P, and I foresee us sticking with that for a long time.
Yes, I wanted to kind of plan something that Enrique said about the teachers and all that. What is your level of attrition of teachers at Loyola de Logo?
It's actually very high. We've had a couple teachers that have had like.
No, you mean low.
Low. Yes, I'm so sorry. Yes.
Wrong way.
You're sounding too excited.
Not attrition. I'm sorry. Retention. Yes, the opposite of attrition. Retention. It's been very high. We've had a couple teachers that have had licensure areas in different, like they might not have been licensed in elementary, and they were a K-12 Spanish, so they got a job somewhere in the district.
And just one other question, because when we're talking about the MAP scores, I understand the MCAs, in third grade we're fairly new and all that kind of stuff, because it's third grade and we're now in our first fourth grade year. But the MAP scores that you saw started in 2016.
Correct.
And so, I mean, I don't see MAP scores from other schools, so I don't have anything to compare this to, but just from the district and national, I would go with state more than national. What I usually see at the Minnesota Department of Education. But to drop down and to be at 43 when the district's at a 66 just by spring of 2017, what type of adjustments were made then? Because obviously we're seeing the same pattern. And so these aren't new revelations for the tests. The test scoring in general being low. I mean, what started back in 2016 and 2017 to try to address this?
Yeah, so again, it's kind of the same type of thing. It's looking at some of the resources. It's looking at looking at data, forming those groups, and then just trying to really align some of the resources. And again, we always want to get better. It's always our hope. We are, like the rest of our district, we're continuous improvement, and some of those things that we really hope to get better in all areas.
Okay. I want to reiterate that I'm glad you clarified that you're not going to do a whole lot of studying before you start helping these kids, because every day lost is a day lost for the child to get educated. So I'm glad that you're being quicker in your responses than it was first sounding. And that if the resources are there, that you have the resources you need. I understand it's a new program, and there's always tweaks that need to be made as you're going through a program. And hopefully that those first kids that are coming through are getting if they need to be, backfilled on what they've missed, if they've missed anything, so that you can get them up to speed is, things that I'd like to find out that are happening. Otherwise, I think that kind of covers everything that we wanted to talk about tonight. And Terry, I guess I'd ask you with administration with some of the questions that have come up, what kind of steps you've taken on some of the current concerns that parents have had, so the board knows what you've been doing.
Yeah, and I think.
Or Jeff, whatever.
I think we can both speak to it, but I think, we're grateful for questions and concerns that come forward, because it helps us get better. It helps us, really take a deep dive and make sure that we're providing the quality programming that our parents expect and that I expect. So I think the process over the last couple of months, I think especially the MAP and the MCA analysis has been really good to see the predictability about where we are. And while I'm not waiting for the next test, I've also really been in this place of I want this to be an authentic immersion program. So scores are lower than we would want right now. And I just want to make sure that we're giving the immersion program the chance and the opportunity to make the gains that I would expect to make, even though I know right now they're lower than they need to be. So I feel really confident, with the continued alignment of curriculum, with the work and the professional development that the teaching and learning team has provided, and I think we will really study those mid-year results to see where we're at that point. Jeff, what else, anything that you'd add to that?
You covered it.
Okay. This was a little bit longer discussion than anticipated, but very good information. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. Anytime, please, if you're interested in coming and visiting, feel free.
Thank you. Moving on to the new elementary naming.
Christy and Jeff are going to take the lead on this.
Well, good evening. Is everyone still wide awake? Well, we're excited to present to you tonight what we've been working on. Thank you. The culmination of our naming committee process, so to help you get closer to selecting a name for our beautiful new elementary school. So just to give you a quick background, because some of you I know weren't here back in December, we did come to the board back in December to ask for approval of a committee roster. So we did that December 10th, and this is our roster. The committee was made up of parents in both Savage and Prior Lake. We also had licensed staff and support staff, and we had community residents as part of our process. We do have a naming policy, so the first thing we did is take a look at that. These are some of the key points from that. Obviously, you as a school board get to make that final decision about the name. And we are to bring no more than 5 names to you. Tonight we'll be bringing 3. And then we also asked that, or you asked that when people submit names, historical and geographical significance of the location be considered. So we communicated that to the public. Thank you. And these are just all the ways we communicated. Email, Prior Lake American, Savage Pacer, the website, and Facebook. And then we wanted to have a kind of a lengthy time period for people to submit names because we had winter break in the mix there. So December 11th to January 10th. My email inbox was hopping. I had 103 people submit names, and they all submitted at least 1 or more names. And then January 14th, the committee gathered to review all of the name submissions. So with that, now would be a good time to hand this out if you wouldn't mind, Jeff. One of the first things we did when we brought the committee together is we wanted to make sure that they saw all of the names that were submitted. So that's what Jeff is handing out to you right now. We asked people, for the name and their email, where they live, with their name ideas, and then if they wanted to provide some comments or some context surrounding the name idea. So the first 2 pages of that handout are all 103 submissions, people who submitted names. And then that last page, the 3rd page, it's the same list, it's just grouped so people could see there are some definite themes that rose to the top there. And so that's just another look to see what some trends were that came forward. So the committee looked at all of those things, they looked at the policy, they knew what their charge was, and in the end, these are the 3 names that they are bringing forward.
Yeah, I think the group really had, we spent a lot of time looking at the policy. We also spent a lot of time just in small group, whole group discussion, just, again, really recognizing and kind of the topic of Savage kind of came front and center. What is it that's really meaningful to Savage? That's where this new elementary will be, and how do we continue to acknowledge the significance of Savage? And so you can see here the recommendations, 2 historical, 1 really topography and the aggregate component. So.
But these aren't really in any particular order. I think the group felt, all of these names fit the charge, and they were comfortable with all of these names.
The other thing that the group talked about was really just spent some time talking about Bill Pearson, kind of his role in the community. Certainly when we look at the policy, I don't know if there was really a tight fit relative to naming a new elementary, but I think the group did talk about, right now, when we look at that whole entire site between the new elementary, the ball fields that are also being created as part of this as well, and the existing ball fields, that maybe the district consider looking at naming those fields in honor of Mr. Pearson. And so that was just something that the committee wanted to pass along as well to the district to consider, because right now the fields we're talking about, we've called them SS9. And I think at some point we've had a broader conversation as a district that we do need to look at naming, once things are in place. This will really be a complex to help orient the public to when they're having events there and athletic events and things like that. So.
Comments or
Questions?
I'm surprised there weren't any birds.
Anyway,
Bird names. Bird, because of red tail and all that.
Oh.
I was expecting somebody to come up with a endangered bird to Minnesota to name the school after or something like that.
I really like them all. I mean, they did a great job.
So what's our next steps here?
Yeah.
well, the decision makers in
Make
this.
the decision.
Next step,
Be
take
like,
out
"Oh,
action."
it can work.
So do we discuss it now and bring one name up, or are we gonna?
I think I guess what I would expect is that we would have some discussion now and get everyone's input on it, because I have my own personal feeling about what I would like to see, but I don't know anyone else's perspective. So if you have something you'd like to share, and then we'll come to the meeting on the 11th and we'll vote. I believe we should vote on all 3, because the committee brought all 3 forward.
So we vote on each
On
one?
the committee.
We vote on each one?
Bring all 3.
Three.
We'll bring
Oh,
all
bring all 3, and then we're gonna have the.
And we'll vote on
Instead
them.
of right here, taking 1 off, you mean?
Right.
Or 2, yeah. That's very respectful.
Okay.
Well, I personally like the idea of recognizing Mr. Pearson in the fields, because for one thing, I don't want it to be called SS9. That's not the greatest memory of a process that we had to go through. And he was very, very good for us through the whole process of getting the land to build the elementary. So to recognize him in some way with the fields would be great. So I would think that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah, I would totally support that too, for the building.
I like
Either
that
one.
too. I think it should be William G. though, because we have a lot of Pearsons. I think to name it William G. Pearson would be more appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah, it might get shortcut at some point,
Yeah.
but I
So
think
we
it
go with
honors,
Pearson.
I think you're right, it honors the name.
Yeah, I kind of like the name Hamilton Landing. I think that's I think that the history and all that, bringing in, we've got, I like the name Dan Patch, but I think there's just way too much name Dan Patch here. And Sand Ridge, just kind of bland. Hamilton is just historical. It seems a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more in line with learning about the history of the area.
It was interesting because that was some of the conversation that the committee had as well. Initially they said, well, Dan Patch maybe is overused, and then as they talked, they're like, well, really, it's Dan Patch Days, and then it's the field.
Right.
And some of the parents on the committee just said, you know, until your kid is at the high school, they might not even, you know, the rest of the community might not even know it's Dan Patch Field. So it was interesting, because that was one of the initial things that somebody said, and then if you, as they started thinking about that, well, it really isn't that much. So it was interesting.
Anyone else ready to speak yet?
Well, I like Hamilton, and I like Dan Patch. I do like the idea of playing up Savage, and at first look, Dan Patch plays up Savage a little bit more in my mind. I make that connection more quickly than Hamilton. I didn't actually, I'm embarrassed to say, after 15 years of living in Savage, didn't know the history of Hamilton. So I think both work well, but if you were looking at kind of playing up that Savage component, Dan Patch jumps higher to me on the page. But I think the naming committee did a great job. So we're in good shape.
Stacy?
Me? Kind of fun. Yeah, I mean, I really like them all. I mean, I could certainly land somewhere between Dan Patch and Hamilton. I don't have a real strong, I mean, I knew about Hamilton, but I didn't, and I like the landing, because I was like, that's kind of interesting. So, yeah, either one works for me, Dan or.
Yeah, I definitely love Hamilton. I haven't seen the show yet, but Hamilton Landing.
That was actually, that's really funny, because that was part of the conversation. I never even compared the two, and I love the show, but that was one of the reasons the committee didn't wanna land on just Hamilton. And so then it was a lot of other words to use with it, and the landing had it. But they were worried that if it was just Hamilton, people would think of the musical.
Right.
So
Like
interesting,
Alexander
yeah.
Hamilton.
See, and I thought it was president.
Right.
Well,
But
yeah.
same thing. I really like Hamilton Landing, more so than Dan Patch, and I understand what you're saying, Michael, but Hamilton was the original name of Savage before it became Savage. And I didn't realize it was where the first settlers came from, Hamilton, Ontario. I didn't know that part, and that there was a trading post here. So I think it represents a lot of history and a lot more people, whereas Dan Patch being a horse is one thing. So I think it's more representative of the beginnings of the area. So I really like Hamilton Landing the most. So there you go. So now we all know what everyone's thinking except for two. And on February 11th, we're gonna vote.
We're really excited for y'all to make a decision, because as we've been continuing to work through the design, it's gonna be fun to give the building a personality. And, you know, any of those up there, and not that the name totally makes the personality, but it'll be fun to start thinking about the different components that we can use, depending on where the name lands and what that might look like.
And I think the committee did a great job, and by giving it a name, it makes it more real, rather than talking about New Elementary.
Yeah.
Talking about New Elementary for years, now we're finally gonna have a name on it, so it's exciting. Okay, speaking of elementary, let's talk about
Alright.
elementary attendance boundary
And yet,
process.
passing around one more piece of paper, which I
Wow,
really,
the trees are
Paul,
gone.
I know, and there were just, we added a couple members of the committee and a public input session date, so just wanted you to have an update on this, I apologize. So in front of you, as it's going around, you'll see the way we've designed the process. Dennis Cheeseborough is helping facilitate the process for us, similar to the facilities task force. You can see at the bottom in blue we have a design team, which is more of an internal administrators. We have asked every elementary principal to serve on this committee. You know, we had talked about, do we just have a couple representatives, and we decided that this touches every single one of our schools, and we wanted to be sure every principal was a part of the process and well-spoken about the process. So you can see the design team on the left, and the blue there designates the different meetings that they have. And then the input team you can see is made up of parents and community members and staff members. And we're going through a process that elementary principals are doing, they sent out, I believe, well, it was supposed to be yesterday. Did it go out? Okay. Yesterday they were gonna do all call to parents and staff asking if folks wanted to and were able, based on the schedule, to serve on this committee. They would submit their name, and we had some criteria that we established, and we wanted to make sure that it was resident parents. We wanted to make sure that there weren't two parents that lived across the street from each other, but maybe in different areas of a particular elementary boundary attendance area. We wanted to make sure that the two parents chosen from a building weren't both fifth grade parents, and we had some variety in that. So they are seeking names of individuals who want to volunteer for this, and then they'll really do a lottery drawing, paying attention to the criteria that were established. You can see we also have asked Kelly Boston to serve on this as a kids company representative. We'll certainly have our transportation partners a part of it, as well as our non-public schools, and then a couple community members. Right now we're thinking of both, there's new city administrators in both the city of Savage and the city of Prior Lake. That'd be a really great perspective to get, and to get them, beginning the relationship with the school district. So that's kind of what the process looks like. The data that we're going to be using, Dennis Cheeseborough has collected a lot of data from us, and really the software programming that he's using is going to be helpful in terms of helping us, as we look at where is the concentration of 0 to 4-year-olds, where's the growth. As we look at, we had our first meeting, our first design team meeting last week, and you can really see where are those chunks of farmland that have potential for growth. And it's going to really help as we talk about the ideal capacity of each of the buildings, knowing that we'd like a solution that can last 3 to 4 years, knowing, if we do it that way, we're not going to just open all buildings at 90% capacity. We've got to look at where the growth in our population, as well as potential growth for development. So there might be a building that only opens at 65% capacity. Also really looking at how do we ensure that we've got some balance across the district in terms of different student populations. That's another opportunity that we have at this point as well. Jeff, any questions that you have? We're just starting the process. Like I said, we did include, so you can see here, one of the requests that we heard from the board was, is there going to be a point that we have an opportunity to have an information session with the community? So we asked Dennis about that, which is why this is different than the one that was in the original board packet. He thought right between that third design meeting would be enough time to be able to share information with people and get input on that. Otherwise, we'd be too early in the process, too late in the process. So you can see that March 18th is a Monday night. I thought that would be one of the things that the Community Engagement Committee could talk about, what the role what role board members you'd like at that, and how we can organize that, what we want that to look like. But we thought as soon as we could get that date out, that would be a good thing for our community.
Terry, I have a question.
Yeah.
When we did the original, or the first redistricting as part of this change, when we moved some populations away from Red Tail Ridge and into Glendale, that area, we had a couple of guiding principles. One, we weren't going to have people.
Yeah.
Move twice. Okay.
So thank you, that guiding change process.
I was reading through that, and I didn't see some of the things that we talked about is we weren't going to ask people to move again. And then the other thing that we kind of talked about, but we never really had to memorialize because that wasn't an issue then, is we weren't going to cut neighborhoods in half. Because we talked about, and I remember sharing my story of when I first moved to Savage here, almost 20 years ago. My neighborhood was split 3 ways between Burnsville, Shakopee, and Prior Lake, Savage. And so we had 4 buses sometimes going down the road at the same time. And we kind of talked about that, about splitting up the neighborhoods between multiple elementaries. We wanted to take whole chunks for transportation and other things. I read through this and I didn't see that in there, neither piece.
So.
Maybe I missed it because it was embedded, or maybe we just.
So
decided
this
not to do it.
result right
Uh-huh.
here, we have to make one adjustment, and that's evaluate and maintain the 18-19 boundary adjustments of Red Tail Ridge Elementary neighborhoods
Okay.
to Glendale and then also from Westwood too.
Okay.
So that has
We have
to be
to add
tweaked
that.
here.
So you're just, you're saying what I said in the first
Yeah.
step, it just
Yes.
wasn't, okay.
Now, as far as splitting neighborhoods, now the example you talked about was Shakopee and Burnsville and Priory Savage, we don't have control
No,
over
no,
that.
no, I was just using that as an
Yeah.
example, because if we take whole,
Yep.
you know, subdivisions and one block and say, okay,
Yeah.
5 houses are going to this elementary, another 5 are going to this, it can get a little crazy.
Yeah, I think as we go through the process, we have to see how when we take a look at how some of that may play out. I mean, the lines will go somewhere. There might be some natural boundaries, if there's main highways or things that may make sense. But I think as we get down to the nitty-gritty, there may be some, main roads that go through that there might be a neighborhood that's split. I think we'll have to see where, I guess, some of our drafts lead us to, so we can have that conversation about what that might look like.
Okay.
And I believe in the past, that was something that was talked about to try to avoid it.
Right.
But in some
And
cases, it can't be.
we're fortunate we have enough hazards, so roads that kind of dissect the neighborhood anyhow, so.
And then to your point, there's roads like I live on, and I'll see 5 or 6 buses go by because they have to get to another section.
Yep.
So. I have a comment, or I guess a possible request. It seems to be a long time between January 28th tonight until April 22nd before the board has any update or discussion. And I guess I'm asking if we could possibly on the March 25th meeting, kind of get a sense of where it's all at before, especially because it's gonna be out there in the community, it's an emotional subject for parents. If the board could kind of have an update on how you're arriving at some of these things before it gets to April 22nd.
Yep.
If the rest of the board is in agreement,
Makes sense.
I would appreciate that.
Of course you do. She probably had the agenda ready tomorrow morning.
Is the board involved in the public input session? Are we going to be?
Well, that's what I said, that we talked to the community engagement committee
Okay.
and
Super.
get direction from them. The involvement, I would say, is very much welcoming, serving cookies perhaps, listening, but not really, I think, the input piece of it,
Well, you can't go to a community session with a blank sheet of paper either and just, you've got to have
Well, we will
some
have by,
ideas on
we
the
will
table
have by
for
then
them.
had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings. So we'll be bringing to them, where are we in the process, or what's that look like?
And probably options at that point, so they're not, the options that you're considering.
Yeah, and I think part of what we'll want to work with the community engagement committee on is what's the purpose of that? Because we really being clear with that, because is it just sharing information? What's that feedback or input loop? What's that look like? So, yeah, we need to talk about that.
So you may need to retitle it possibly.
Yeah,
When you
what
say
did I
public
title it?
input,
Yeah, I think
if
it's
you
just
want public
information.
information.
Right.
I guess that's something you'll have to talk about with the committee.
Yeah, well, we've got a meeting next week, I think,
Mhm.
so we'll try to get some more direction on what that looks like. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll move on then. You're good with that? Paul?
Yes.
Okay. The legislative committee platform.
Yeah, and Stacy, I guess you're the lone rep on this, but as you all know, we have, we reviewed multiple, I think we started this process in October, reviewed multiple different organization platforms as we came forward. And you can see where we landed, aligned to some of what AMSD is doing, some of what C is doing, some of what some of our other organizations are doing. And feel really good, you know, the focus on the 3 and 3 on the funding, the 3%, that's where most of the organizations have landed in terms of their advocacy. Special education funding, you know, is clearly something, and I feel really fortunate because Senator Pratt has done so much work on the special ed work, and I think that's something he's going to continue to move forward. We'd also really like that number 3 to be able to utilize the long-term facilities maintenance funding for school safety and security. We've heard a lot in the early stages of the legislative session that both sides of the aisle are trying to get some fast wins, and that might just be the place that it happens, so we'll have to keep watching that. And then lastly, continuing to really work on tax equalization. Also down below, you've got a couple of policy priorities as we look at state accountability systems, as well as some flexibility or making sure that we're understanding the new tiered systems of support for our licensed teachers. And lastly, making sure that our transportation requirements, we have the same kind of requirements that are for open enrolled students as well as for our resident students. So we thought the committee really looked at both. This is the first year of a biennium funding year, so what are some funding priorities, and then what are some other policy priorities? So that's kind of what we're looking at that, and we'll bring it forward for approval. Anything else, Stacy? No? No questions? Okay, great.
Okay, good. On to mid-year goal progress report.
Yeah, and I'm watching time, and the intent of this was not at all that we would go through this. I want you, as a board, I want to be sure that at mid-year, you have a high degree of confidence that the goals that we set at the beginning of the year, the district goals, our green and purple work, that you have a high degree of confidence that we're making progress on that. We haven't come forward with a lot of the progress updates on some of that in the first half of the year. Construction, we certainly have. And that's kind of how it's laid out each year. But now this spring, as you saw in that initial document, the board agenda that we shared with you, you can start seeing how we'll start bringing some of these progress and updates and status reports to you. But just wanted you to get a glimpse of at least briefly the work aligned to each of those goal areas that we're working at. And I'd be happy. I think this is a great place on your monthly meetings when we meet. If you've got some questions around this, you know, I can either have others who are leading this work join me, or I'm happy to address any questions that you have. But we could get real deep into this right now, and that wasn't the extent. The intent was that you get a chance to kind of see where we are at mid-year. And if you've got any follow-up questions, we'd be happy to take those at any time.
Are there any questions this evening? Board governance policy. This is the first reading of this policy. Actually, it's to remove a policy.
Deb
I've just sitting
Anderson.
here all night listening to all this.
I know, and I'm still
Think
wide
of
awake.
all the things you've learned.
I know, right?
We did predict 3 hours on this, by the way.
I know, we did.
Right. Well, good evening, everyone. In your board packet, there was information in there regarding the review of policy 608.1, which was in regard to the provision of special ed and related services at private schools. And upon reviewing the policy, we have made a recommendation that the board remove the policy and totally eliminate it. The rationale for that is because current law states right now that a school district, we get the choice of where we're going to provide those services, whether it be at a non-public or the public site. So that's up to us. So there's no need really to have a policy because we get to make that decision already. Does that make sense when I say that? We get to determine those locations, and we have to discuss it on a student-by-student basis to make that determination. So a really good example I'll give you would be, say for instance, we have a student who qualifies for services under blind and vision impairment and attends school. Parents chose to enroll a student at St. Mike's. We would want to be able to take a look at that IEP
And that might be an instance where we might say for 1 year as a kindergartner with this student, because of her need to get to know her community, it would make sense for us to go provide that service there. However, after 1 year, once she gets acclimated to that, we want to make her world a little bit bigger. Then we would make the decision, say for instance, to bring her back here and provide those services at our site. But we have to address it on an individual student basis anyway.
Any questions?
The only question I have is that this is private school. What is, how does that decision get made with regards to the Southwest Metro? Or is that a decision that's made at all, because this wouldn't even apply at all?
This doesn't apply to, so say for instance, there is a private school cannot, they would have to enroll with us here, and then our special education IEP teams would make that recommendation if needed to go to Southwest Metro. They can't go directly there, they're not a member, and it wouldn't work that way.
Okay.
And so the other piece in that policy was regarding preschool. And we're just recommending that we continue to exercise discretion regarding the provision of early childhood special education services for preschool students. So it's not necessarily that we will go out to every community service or community preschool and do that. We want to be able to give the district some options to, to be good stewards of the special education funds we have and what makes sense for our staff and students.
This will come back on February 11th.
All right. Yep.
Thank you. Superintendent relations. I don't think so. Public engagement. I'm really not sure which place we.
We have a meeting coming up.
Yep, you do a meeting.
Yeah.
We do.
Next Wednesday?
Your legislative.
Yeah. Yep. Next Wednesday, right? That got changed from
Yes.
Thursday to Wednesday.
Mhm.
Wednesday like 4.
Feb 6.
Yeah, what?
It's February 6th.
Mm-hmm. At
At
4
what
o'clock?
time?
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to informational items, the board meeting in March has been changed. We changed from March 11th to March 4th. And then public forum, you said we didn't have anyone to speak.
Everybody signed up.
Okay.
Well, I know we have two, I mean, I don't think they knew that, they had to sign up, but I know there's a couple people here that want to speak.
Okay.
If it's possible.
Yeah. Sure.
He wants to come up front or just?
Yeah, why don't you come up here where it says presenter.
So I'm going to take my 3 minutes every chance I get to speak on behalf of Loyola Del Lago and the kids that need help there. So if you're going to give it to me, I'm going to take it. Thank you. So at first, I'd love to just say thank you. Thank you for putting this on the study session tonight. Thank you for taking parents seriously. Thank you for listening, and I hope you continue to do that. And I just want to advocate for just 2 main things. One, and it was brought up tonight, an independent audit for this program. You heard a lot tonight about what are the goals, what are the intentions of this program, and I have to tell you as a parent with a child in the program, what our goals and intentions are not the reality of what is played out. And I have several examples I could speak to. The second thing I'd like to just keep advocating for is immediate help for our 4th graders. And again, this was brought up tonight. I know you're thinking about it. How do we get these kids ready for the middle school? There are things parents are doing. I had a chance to see the data that you were shown tonight in advance, so I'm familiar with what was shared. There's, in my opinion, a reason why every summer it goes back up and every year it keeps going down. As a parent, I know many parents, including myself, we're tutoring, we're doing summer programs, we're doing other things to help our kids as much as we can, and we know we're in this together with you. Parents are willing to do that. I would love for you to look at, are there some after-school programs you can offer to the 3rd, 4th graders, those kids that are really needing the help? Parents are willing to pay for it. Be there, show up, do it. Summer programming. Is there some stuff we can do this summer and next summer just to get our kids to where they need to be? As far as kind of that data, those FMP scores, I'm sure you picked up on it, but as a Spanish school, we are at that 34% proficient in Spanish. I mean, there's really no reason our kids shouldn't at least be performing at a 50% mark for Spanish reading. That's even lower than the English reading. So we need those resources to get these kids to where they need to be. We need you to keep advocating for this program, and I really want you to think about looking at this from an independent, outside source. Get someone in. I know you've done surveys with parents. I would love for you to do another one now that all of the test data is out and really known. I think you get some different results. I'd love for you to just bring in somebody else. We all want to do better. We know we can do better. Please, please don't stop looking into this. Please don't just think good enough is good enough, because it's not. Thank you.
Hi, I also want to thank you for putting this on your study session. I appreciate it more than you know. What I want to make really clear is, for me and for most of all these parents, it is not about the test scores. It's not about the data. That, for us, is a checkpoint of something that we knew was not going well long before these test results came out. I see large gaps in the program, and it's not about the test scores for me. There's a lot of great resources available from the district. A lot of what they're doing in training of teachers is in the right direction. I've really looked into it. We've had some meetings, but there's a disconnection between what's available from the district and what's actually happening inside the classrooms at Loyola Del Lago. And it is a significant disconnection. And I have countless examples, which I will continue to share with you. And I really want to echo what Dr. Sala said. I want this to be a legitimate immersion program, and we are far from having, in my opinion, a legitimate immersion program. Those F&P scores show you the proficiency of our kids in Spanish. And we have a group of parents, we're actually working right now with another immersion schools and other professionals to test our kids in Spanish and see, are they where you would expect them to be in your school? What gaps do you see? And we'll be happy to share that data with you. But I think you'll find it's not going to be the results that we want to see. One of the first things in that slide was that the kids in an immersion program should be achieving high levels in all academic areas. My children are not achieving high levels in all academic areas. The rigor in the program is so lacking and so disappointing. The levels of learning, what they're doing, and the lack of follow-through and completing lessons is just disappointing. I had a 4th grader in the program who I've taken out of the program. I still have a 2nd grader in the program and 2 kids I want to send to this program. I'm here for immersion, and you'll continue to hear from me. I want an immersion program in this community. It's an amazing opportunity. We know what immersion should look like. We've done our research. We're talking to other people. It shouldn't look like this. And I'm going to end on a positive note. Like Diana said, you've got a great group of parents. We are very understanding that this is a new program, and we knew there was going to be bumps in the road. But I don't know if Stacy asked or Mary, but you said, how big of a gap? I want to know that. No one is answering that. Yeah, we're not doing well. We're a little bit behind, but for a new program, really, that's significantly behind? It's alarming to me. So please think about independently auditing this program. Teaming up, we're not using mentors from other immersion schools. Our peer coach doesn't speak Spanish, doesn't know how to implement those things. We want true immersion, use true immersion mentors. Use peer coaches that know how to do immersion. Partner with, there's so many districts that are so close doing this really well. Why don't we go alongside of them? Don't just visit their school one time. Pick one and partner with them. That exists with other immersion schools that I'm talking to. They're doing that. And again, we're tutoring our kids. We've started doing a lot of tutoring. We're actually working on putting some summer programs together. Parents are paying for it themselves. I'm spending a significant amount to keep up the Spanish of my daughter that I've taken out of the program. We're in this to do what we can to support the program, and we ask the district to do the same. Thank you.
Okay, I think we will now adjourn the study session and open up the meeting, conduct business.